Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for June 23rd, 2021. We have a statement to make pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals will be conducted via remote participation. An audio recording of these proceedings will be available upon request to planning@somervillema.gov. That's planning@somervillema.gov. Thank you. To kick off the meeting tonight, we're going to go off the agenda a little bit, and we have to do an election for the post of clerk. The vacancy was created when Danielle Evans had to resign. Danielle was on the board with us for several years, very faithful and did due diligence. So we wish her well in her new endeavor. At this time, I'd like to open and asking for your votes for nominations for the clerk's position. Do I hear any nominations to the clerk? Yes, Elaine Severino.
I'd like to nominate Josh Safdie.
Okay, Josh Safdie. Do I hear a second for Josh Safdie's nomination? Ann Brockelman seconds the nomination. Next question, Mr. Safdie, are you willing to accept the nomination?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, is there anyone else that has a nomination for the post of clerk? Seeing none and hearing none, then I will close the nominations for clerk and move on with the voting. We'll go around and take the voting. So in the matter of Josh Safdie for clerk, please vote and cast your vote as you are called upon. Catherine, yes for Josh Safdie or no?
I approved, yes.
Yes. Elaine Severino?
Yes.
Yes. Ann Brockelman?
Yes.
Yes. Susan Fontano? Yes. And Josh Safdie?
Yes.
Okay. Let the record show that Josh Safdie was elected 5-0. Congratulations, Josh. I'm sure I am, but I'm sure the rest of us all looking forward to working with you in this permanent position. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So now we're going to put you to work. The first thing on the agenda tonight we'd like to do, Josh, is the approval of minutes. So could you make a motion for that, please?
Sure, Madam Chair. We have been provided with minutes from March 31st, 2021 and April 28th, 2021 to approve. I make a motion we approve them.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Elaine Severino. In the matter of the minutes presented March 31st, 2021 and April 28th, 2021, I'll go around and ask for your vote. Catherine?
Aye.
Susan Fontano? Yes. Josh Safdie?
Yes.
Ann Brockelman?
Yes.
And Elaine Severino?
Yes.
Let the record show that the minutes presented tonight were approved 5-0. The next item, we're going to go off the agenda again. We're going to jump down to just a little bit of a presentation from Louisa Oliveria. She's with the City of Somerville, and she's going to speak to us in the matter of 31 Tufts Street. Now, let me just ask, Charlotte, does the clerk need to open this up and then we can hear her testimony? Yes?
No, Madam Chair. This is an informative presentation by Louisa, and the case itself can be opened later once we get to the substance of the case.
Fantastic. So, welcome. Where are you, Louisa? There you are. Welcome, and tell us what you have to say.
I'm here. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm coming to you tonight because this is the first civic space case that the Zoning Board of Appeals is hearing. And so I wanted to let you know really what we are working towards in the city in terms of civic spaces and public spaces. The slide in front of you is the Public Space and Urban Forestry Division in OSPCD. And you can see this is us pre-pandemic, so we were looking good. We're a little bit more haggard now, but we're composed of landscape architects and urban foresters, arborists, and we have been bringing you parks and trees for many, many years. If you can go to the next slide, Charlotte. One of the things we worked hard on with Dan Bartman, who was crafting the zoning, is an understanding of the fact that more and more of our public space is going to be generated through private development. And historically, there have been some issues with these types of spaces. We know from a long legacy of making these POPs, as they're known, privately owned public spaces, that they don't always read as public spaces or serve the broader community, and sometimes are more they're being designed to serve the amenities of the neighboring buildings. So we have been, we are working very hard to make sure that we have a good quality civic spaces coming out of the development. So our mission, as we have identified it, is to plan, construct, and steward the public realm to promote environmental public health vitality through the city's networks of public space and the urban forest. Charlotte, you can go to the next one. I think everyone is in agreement, and especially after COVID, of how important the parks and open spaces are to our city and just to the health of any city, really. So in the private development realm, in the zoning, it's baked in that developers are working with us and through us to ensure that the city's receiving a quality open space, that the materials are of high quality, and that the design is of high quality. And as it says on the slide, 60 of the 105 projected new acres of civic space will come from private development. So this is very important. And the civic space is required by our division it's required to go through us. We've been trying very hard to meet with the teams very early on, and then we approve that civic space. Next slide, Charlotte. So the goals of what we're looking at when we're talking to the development teams and the design teams are basic good principles for civic space in the city. So we want the public spaces to read as publicly accessible to all. So it should not feel like I need to go in and buy something to access this park. We want, both in the design and in the signage, for them to be seen as truly public spaces that are open to everyone. Everyone should feel comfortable going in. We want the amenities to respond to the resident needs. So oftentimes we'll have a community meeting where a few people are saying, I really want a hot tub, but in fact we need a playground. So we really want to make sure that it's not just based on who's coming to the public meeting, but that we know the data around who lives in the neighborhood, what other spaces are there, and what is needed in that space. And we want, again, as I referenced, we want people to know that it is a public space. And we have a number of public spaces now that you may not know. For example, Metro 9 over near East Cambridge, that is a public space. The, gosh, what's the name of the place with the courtyard? George, did you? It's on the tip of my tongue. There's a small dog park and then there's a courtyard. Maxwell's Green. Sorry about that, COVID brain. Those are publicly accessible open spaces. Not sure that everybody knows that. And we want to develop policies for ownership, for operation of the parks and maintenance. So in some covenants, the developers are required to maintain the spaces. In others, they're building them and the city is maintaining them. And so again, those have different kind of agreements to them. Next slide. We do have design guidelines requirements for civic space. Some of these are still in draft form, but the guidelines have to do with the civic space type as defined in the zoning. And most often the type is determined during the master plan special permit phase for large developments. And if there is no master plan special permit, the civic space study that we require them to do, where, as I alluded to earlier, they're having to study who lives in the neighborhood, what are the adjacent civic spaces, what are their needs for, helps inform what we will encourage them to create. So I think that's the last slide. I just really wanted you to know that we really have shifted to trying to assure better quality space and to making sure that this privately generated open space is something that serves the residents of the city, all of the residents of the city. I don't know if it's appropriate to take questions. Charlotte, you let me know, but if so, I'm here for it.
This is Charlotte speaking. I think it's perfectly appropriate to take questions if they're about broad civic space rather than about specifically 31 Tufts.
Josh? Oh,
Yeah, Louisa, I wonder if you could just clarify, well, I guess this might be specific to Tufts, but in general, when this is private development, which is intended to be used as public space, what is the actual ownership?
so it depends on the covenant that's written. I don't know specifically what the Tufts one is. I don't know if you get into that, but sometimes a developer will own the open space and they dedicate it in perpetuity as publicly accessible, and then it has to be publicly accessible. And then there are also different agreements for whether they will maintain it or the city maintains it. In other cases, for example, if any of you have been to the Lou-Anne David Park, the developer there bought the building and in exchange had to build a park. That one is, they built the park, but the ownership and maintenance is being transferred to the city of Somerville. So there are different variations of how these are structured. And in general, when the city is owning a park, then we want to assure that the maintenance is something that we can do with our DPW, because as you know, maintaining the system is not an easy task.
Okay, thank you.
Elaine Severino?
I guess it was just touched on there at the end of the comment, the ending comment. I always worry about maintenance of these parks or even any landscaping that we ever require of developers or people. Just so many times or many months later or a season later, I go by things that I know were in front of the zoning board and the landscaping is horrific and the maintenance doesn't exist. So I just want to make sure that that really is going to happen.
So Elaine, I've been with the city for 10 years and you are beating my drum. You're absolutely right. Landscape is all about maintenance. And so in the zoning, it really does help us because we can have more control over that. And when it's maintained by a private developer, we can make sure that there are signs that say who is responsible for maintaining it. We can also work with them to have a maintenance plan that they then need to follow up on.
And to make sure that weeds are not considered landscaping. Often I do see greenery there, but it's just all tall weeds on some of these sites, which I think maybe sometimes say, well, there's landscaping there. Look at all that greenery. And it's just weeds.
So Elaine, you do touch upon one thing that folks need to be aware of. Sometimes you're right, it is weeds. And sometimes we're moving more and more towards naturalistic plantings. And so while they look very wild and natural and maybe different from some of the plantings we've had in the past, sometimes they're not weeds. So I don't know how much your knowledge of weeds and plants are, but I just want to make that point that yes, sometimes it's just weeds and no one's taking care of it. And then other times they're much more naturalistic plantings and they are in fact intentional. So I think that's a good distinction to make, but yes, the maintenance is always a struggle.
And I do have the knowledge. I've been a member of the Somerville Garden Club for many, many years. I do extensive gardening. I also love wild flowers, but there's a difference between wild flowers and natural things and weeds. So I really know the difference of weeds and flowers and the difference between one and the other.
Sure, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I know as a gardener, I did not mean to insult your plant knowledge, but it is also true that frequently we'll get 311 calls and people will think that a very naturalistically planted garden is weeds and it's not. So I just want to make that distinction for anybody who's listening in.
I have a question. So when this goes into play at Tough Street, that's my end of the street, the city. When you're planning out the park, is there going to be any participation from outsiders or the neighborhoods? Or is it going to be all of the public space and urban forestry department?
No, so we're not specific to Tough Street, but they all usually have requirements. I believe all the civic spaces have requirements for public meetings. So this one would have had, and I have attended at least 2 of them. So there is absolutely public participation in all of the public spaces, yes.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
if I could interject, civic spaces require site plan approval, the process for which is laid out in the code, and we can get into more of that later if you'd like to ask 31 Tufts Street any questions about what their process has been, but I would wait until we have opened the case and are on that specific case for those questions.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? That's it, Louisa.
Great, well, thank you for having me tonight.
Thanks for coming by and clearing up a few things for us. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So we're gonna make you little notes so when you were speaking with Louisa and listen to what she had to say. And we're gonna jump over to right now, again, for everybody listening and the public as well as our staff here, we're gonna jump over to 515 Somerville Ave. And I understand Mr. Prowakas will be joining us. And whom else might be joining us?
Madam Chair,
Charlotte?
this is Charlotte speaking. We have a number of people who will be joining, and I can promote, I can unmute and promote them to panelists as we are opening the case.
Thank you. So this case has to be open tonight, so we'll have the clerk do that right now.
Madam Chair, this case is 515 Somerville Avenue. Applicant Claudia Murrow seeks an administrative appeal of the building inspector's decision of October 23rd, 2019 to issue 2 building permits for 515 Somerville Avenue. Building permits numbers B19-001687 and B19-001788. The remand is pursuant to number 20 MISC 000283 RBF. Those numbers probably mean something to someone, but not to me. So I don't know if staff wants to explain what the last part of that advertisement means.
This is Charlotte speaking. This was checked by our legal team. To be entirely frank, I'm not sure what those numbers mean other than that they refer to the case with the land court that this remand is pursuant to. But I don't know more than that.
Through the chair, to
Thank you.
reiterate to that point, yeah, that's a land court case number. That's there so we can keep track of what's going back to the court. Once you make a decision, the court looked at this first. It's been remanded back to you. There was a procedural question where the board took a position that there was a procedural error, and the court looked at that and they said they believe there isn't, and therefore it should go back to you for a more substantive review, which is what we're here for tonight.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Josh, for the question. So without further ado, who is going to speak first?
Good evening. Can you hear me? Philip Cahalan for Claudia Murrow.
Yes,
Okay. Yes, I think it's probably I should go first. This is Claudia Morrow's appeal of the building permits that were issued for the development at 515. It's a hotel, as you're familiar, 6-story hotel, 64 feet. Reduction in the parking from 142 or so to 80. They needed variances for all of those three things. They filed in 2018, they filed plans for the hotel, and the board approved those plans and approved the variances and also special permits in 2018. And then before exercising those variances, they filed a second application for revision to the board of the plans, diverse revision, and the board approved those, approved that as well. The Claudia Morrow appealed from that decision to the land court. And after she filed her appeal, they filed their applications for building permits. She then, and they were issued by the ISD, and she appealed the building permits on November 22nd, 2019. I want to correct a few things in the planning staff report that aren't entirely correct about the procedure here. The Claudia Morrow's appeal before the land court, she did not agree to a dismissal of that action. That action was, she has challenged that, and it's currently up on appeal before the appeals court. That resulted in the board decision to annul the 2019 revisions. Mr. Proakis just explained what happened in terms of the procedure. That's correct. The board originally determined her appeal was filed incorrectly of the building permits. That's what we're currently on. And the land court said, no, it was correct. So that's why we're back here on that appeal here tonight. The central issue on this is that the plans and her appeal is that the plans that were approved for the building permit are different from the 2018 decision plans. There's no disputing that. The YEM itself, the developer has submitted, and I've submitted copies of the plans, and they clearly show the differences. And so the question becomes at that point, whether the changes are such that they required new variances. They required a new hearing, a de novo review of variances, or whether you can rely on the variance decisions back in 2018. And the issue is the planning staff went through the issue about whether there should have been appeals of de minimis determinations by the planning staff. There was no requirement for Claudia Morrow to appeal those decisions. She's appealed the building permits, and the issue on the building permits is whether they require a de novo review of the variances, and we submit that they do. The issue isn't so much what the construction of the board is or of their own regulations on de minimis changes. It's what the legislature requires when you have variances, and it's what the Supreme Judicial Court has stated is required. And they're very clear. Variances are to be very rarely granted. They are strictly construed. And if there are changes to the plans on which variances are granted, then the review, you have to get new variances, and it's a de novo review of the issues on variances. In particular, if there were changes to the footprints of the building that you're building, and there's no question that's occurred here. It's a simple review. YEM's application actually shows it even clearer than ours, but it's clear. They show the differences. And there's clearly a change in that footprint towards the Laurel Street side, towards the front of the building, and then significant changes in the rear of the building. Those required a de novo review, and they have to get a new variance for this building that's being built. And that brings us to the main part of this. Neither the planning staff nor YEM dealt with this. They dealt with the procedural aspects, and they dealt with whether these were de minimis changes or not de minimis changes. I don't even think that comes into play here. It comes into play whether these were changes that were required by the legislature, whether a new review was required or not. But even if you're doing the de minimis changes, you're under the old code, because the appeal, the building permits were issued under the old code. And under the code, it's whether it would be visible to someone who was familiar with the project. Clearly, it's visible. You don't need to be an expert to see that. This building has changed. The footprint's changed. It's changed in its location on the property, and that's all that's required here for de novo review. When you get to the de novo review, and you get to the issue as to whether this qualifies, I spent some time going through whether it qualified for special permits, but variances is even more glaring. This building does not qualify for a variance. To get a variance, you have to establish that because of unique soil topography or shape of the property, there's no economically viable use that you can make of that property under the current zoning, and you can't show that here. You cannot show that they have to have 6 stories, and that's what you'd have to show to get a variance, that they have to have 6 stories, 64 feet, and a reduction of 80 parking spaces in order to make economically viable use of that property. And that's just not even remotely close to what you can do here. So it's not entitled to variances. And it's before this board right here in this hearing right now is that, are they entitled to variances? And they're not. So this building is illegal. It's illegal as built. And that's my short, to the point presentation.
Thank you very much. What is the spelling of your last name, please?
CAHALIN.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see Mr. Proakis is here. Does anybody have any questions of this attorney, or shall we give Mr. Proakis the floor and let's hear what he has to say? Okay, Mr. Proakis.
Thank you. So I think you've seen the staff report that Charlotte pulled together, as well as the documents that have come from the applicant in this case. And I know that there are representatives of the developer as well who are here who may have a perspective that they want to add as well. I want to add the staff's perspective and provide a little bit of our own clarity on this. I do think there are a lot of areas where Attorney Cahalan and I agree in terms of sort of what the question is and how we got here and where we are. But there are a couple of details that I think are fundamentally important. Obviously, the staff has been supportive of this project from the beginning. A lot of the design of this building came from conversations in neighborhood meetings with the ward counselor and the neighbors. And my recollection is that throughout the early hearings on this, the original variance hearing, there was little to no opposition to this project. There was general support in the community. And regardless of whether or not we want to relitigate that question this evening, which I don't think you should be, in October of 2018, this board issued a variance to this project to a hotel development on this site. A variance was issued in October of 2018. That decision, that variance, was not appealed. So it stands at the end of an appeal period without it being appealed. It is indeed a legitimate variance. And we're not in a position to relitigate that question. The second thing that happened is that there was a proposed amendment to that, a substantive, not de minimis amendment, that came through in the summer of 2019. Your board approved that as well, and that amendment was appealed. And then after that, that amendment was withdrawn, and it isn't germane to this case. So the key issue is you kind of have to pull that middle approval out of the conversation, except for the fact that there, some will point out that a couple of the things that were in the de minimis change are similar to what was in that larger change. But that larger change, which included both de minimis and substantive stuff, but we grouped it together because it definitely crossed the line of substantive, was in your purview, approved, appealed, and the building that was built did not do the substantive things that were in that August approval. And Charlotte or the applicant for the original hotel can go through in more detail what any of those are if you want to see. There were some significant changes in that proposal, and those were not acted upon with the project that was done. The project for which building permits were pulled is created and approved through the original October approval that you approved from 2018, plus 2 de minimis change approvals that were signed by the planning director. And there is a little confusion sometimes created because one was signed, I think, a little bit after the building permit was issued, and one was signed before. But signing de minimis changes after a building permit is issued is far from abnormal. These are the sort of things that we adjust, change, and make improvements upon as projects go through. Zigzags are the way the building works. In this case, one case they removed the pool, which created a little notch. And I think the key issue here is that within the realm of the way that buildings evolve from conceptual plans to construction documents, these sort of things sometimes often happen. And de minimis changes are the system that we put in place to address those particular circumstances. Now, so the core key issue here is we had the original approval, de minimis changes were made, the building permit and the de minimis changes to the original approval connect in a way that the two are internally consistent, because the original approval plus the 2 de minimis change approvals equal the building permit plan set that is currently in place. No one on either side has disputed that. The question that has come up is the question of whether or not those de minimis changes are de minimis or are more substantive, and then whether or not on a variance case, one has the ability to make those sort of changes. My first point is that I believe they are not substantive, because when you actually look at them, they are not. They do move lines and walls in and out a little bit, but they're not crossing the line of the things that we typically say requires a return to the board. But I want to address the second issue more carefully, because the applicant's attorney, Ms. Barrow's attorney, sent you a memo and raised this question about this general idea that moving a building wall automatically makes a case need to come back to you de novo versus being de minimis in a variant. And in the memo that he provided, there's a reference to a case. In that case, Lucier versus Peabody Zoning Board, a 2006 case. And I just want to specify that there is a radical and significant difference between the Lucier case and what you have in front of you. The first difference is, in the Lucier case, you had a garage that was added to a house, and that garage was in the setback area. And then afterwards, a person came back and they built a second floor on that garage, which was also in the setback area. So they added more bulk in the setback area. They pretty much doubled, from what I can see, the square footage that was in the setback area that was approved under the initial variance. And under those circumstances, what the court said was that the decision on the variance was clear, that it said you could build X amount in the setback area, and that he built, by the time this was done, more was built, and therefore the decision was told that the building inspector's approval was overturned. In this particular case, there's 2 significant differences. The first is that while there are changes in the setback area here, those changes are not in the area for which they got a variance. They got a variance for parking and a couple other things, not for the setback along Laurel Street or the setback in the rear. In those cases, they were compliant before and they're compliant now. There's no, they don't directly relate to the specific item for which they added a variance. But the second thing is, the case law, it references the general fact that when you reference plans or you reference specific numbers, or you say, this is going to be a 400 square foot addition and it's a 600 square foot addition, that would overtax the variance and require that secondary review. which certainly is the case in the Lucier decision. But in this particular circumstance, and the court did something very specific. They said that they said in that Lucier case that it basically relates to, in order for a condition to be binding, it must be set forth in the decision itself. And the thing that was binding in that case that was set forth in the decision was the size of the building. So what is binding in our zoning approval cases? Well, if you go to the 515 Somerville Ave case approval from October 2018, and you look at item number 1, it says approval is for construction of a 6-story hotel. This approval is based on the following application materials and plans, and it references a set of plans. And then there's a line after it. There's a sentence at the end of it that says, any changes to the approved site plan or elevation/use that are not de minimis must receive SPGA approval. So our decision, every one of our decisions, including this one, very specifically authorizes, even in a variance case, specifically authorizes the ability to get a de minimis approval. And the zoning ordinance specifically authorizes the planning director to issue that de minimis approval. There's no automatic determination that just because you moved a wall, you have to come back and review a variance again. Instead, what it says is there's a method built right into our decision that tells you what to do, which is what the applicant did in this particular case. And you know, I understand, should the board deem that these particular set of changes shouldn't have been approved as de minimis, you could be in a position where you could say, all right, they're not de minimis, and therefore they should have come back to us for a de novo review. And if you come to that conclusion, then we can have a discussion about whether or not this project is entitled to a variance. But I don't want to open up that question today, because that question was settled in October 2018. This board approved a variance and no one appealed it. So that's kind of the story of the staff report plus the information in it. I'm happy to answer questions. Beyond that, if you want to open up to additional comments, that's fine, but we're here. Charlotte and I are here if you have any questions beyond that.
Great, thank you. Before we go any further, is there anything that you'd want to ask George, or to clarify anything that, you know, the attorney had to say? No, I don't either. Okay. So next is we have to see and hear from the public on this. Is that correct, Charlotte?
Madam Chair, next would, if you would like to hear from the
developer?
Yeah, the developer's attorney, they are also online.
Okay,
If not,
great.
so I have unmuted, I think I have everyone, Adam Dash, David Zucker, and Jordan Warsaw from the developers team. If there's anyone else from the developers team, please let me know.
Yes, this is David Zucker, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the development team. And I can be pretty brief because essentially I would like to echo what George has said. He's exactly right that there is no automatic de novo review of any change whatsoever that occurs in the context of a variance. The cases that were cited in the memo that Mr. Cahalan submitted this afternoon were very different and included changes that occurred specifically to the relief that was granted in the variance. There was the one case that George mentioned where the relief granted in the variance was to allow a building to be, or allow a garage to be built 1 foot away from the property line, within a 20-foot setback. There was a second case that was cited that included wholesale changes in a cluster development plan to the locations and orientations of multiple buildings within that development plan. Here in our case, the variance is, as George said correctly, related to the height of the building, the number of stories, and the number of off-street parking spaces. All of those have remained exactly the same from the plans submitted at the conceptual stage in 2018 for the special permit and variances, and the plans that were submitted in support of the building permit. So there's no de novo review just because this is a variance case. What there is the question of these de minimis changes, and all of the changes were submitted as part of the de minimis applications that were made, all of which were approved by the planning director following the requirements of the ordinance that was in effect at the time. And I can just quickly remind everybody what those are, that the changes don't contravene the legal notice or any finding or condition of the special permit granting authority that was contained in the original approval. The changes don't detrimentally impact matters of substance identified in meeting minutes from the original hearing, that the changes don't alter the character of the development, and that the changes would be so insignificant as not to be noticeable to persons generally familiar with the original approval. Those were the 4 findings that the ordinance required and the 4 findings that the director of planning made. And you can see simply by looking at the overlay plans that we submitted as part of our memo that all of those are supported, that the building that was designed at the conceptual phase and approved with the special permit and variances in 2018, which is outlined in black on the overlay plans, is substantially the same as the building that was submitted as part of the construction document plans in support of the building permit application, which is outlined in red on our overlay plan. And if anybody would like, I have that up on my screen, and I can certainly share my screen if need be so that everyone can see these overlay plans. But they show without a doubt that these buildings are substantially the same with only these minimal de minimis changes, all of which were approved and were rightfully approved. In closing, all I'll say, as George said, is that Ms. Murrow did not appeal the special permit and variances granted in 2018, and so cannot use this process to lodge a collateral attack on that special permit and variances. The only question before the board is whether or not the changes were in fact de minimis, which we submit they certainly were. Our architect is also here, and he and I are happy to answer any questions should the board have them.
Okay, does anybody want to see? You all have your packets. Does anyone want to see anything in front of us? Mr. Zucker just referred to.
I would.
And are you all set?
No,
You
I
what?
would like to. I
You would like to see it? What do you
at least
refer to?
point to the page. I have like too many documents open in front of me.
Okay, Mr. Zucker? Would you
Madam
put
Chair,
that up for us? Yes?
I'm making David Zucker the presenter, so he should, if you give him a
Yeah.
moment, he should have that ability.
I just hit show my screen, so
Is this A1.A?
We can see
yes,
it.
A1.1.
Right, got it.
So can you see my screen? The
Mhm,
first
yes.
floor plan, A1.1. Okay, yep. So the outline in red shows the footprint of the building on the building permit plans, and then the line in black right here shows the footprint of the building as submitted in 2018 as part of the special permit and variance process. So any of these de minimis changes would be these small differences between the red line and the black line that you see on these plans. This is the first floor plan. I also have a second floor plan that is representative of floors 2 through 5, sixth floor plan, and a plan for the garage that shows it works in the same way.
So Mr. Zucker, just to be clear, the full architectural drawings are what were approved in 2018, and the red line is what's being built today.
Correct.
Okay.
And what I would say is that the 2018 architectural drawings were the conceptual drawings at the outset of the project, and that what was submitted in 2019 in support of the building permit application were the construction documents that had that were even more detailed and had engineering and all sorts of other considerations put into them that do not happen at the conceptual stage when a special permit is granted. So I can move on to, this is the second floor plan that, like I said, is representative of floors 2 through 5. Again, the black line being the original special permit and variance plan, and the red line representing the 2019 building permit plan. And then again with floor 6. And then finally for the parking garage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ian, does that satisfy you, what you can see?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Great. So is there anything else anybody would like to see from the presenter or from staff at this point before we go further?
No,
Or if the attorney are all satisfied with your digesting? Who spoke up? Catherine.
oh, I said no, I don't need to see anything else.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. Charlotte?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so with that being said, we've listened to the lawyer, we've listened to our staff right now, our director, and now the YEM group, the developer. So may we go forward to listen to the public?
Yes,
If I
Madam
could-
Chair.
Okay,
This is Philip Collin. Could I just make one brief response to what's been presented to you?
sure.
Because there's quite a bit of discussion about case law here, which you don't have in front of you, the Lessier case and the Geneva case, Giovanni case. In this project, if you'll notice, it's not on your screen right now, but on the 2 through 5, the change in the building, it's not insignificant. I know that these were height variances required, but you moved the building that is now a 6-story tall building. It's not insignificant to that decision that you to the variances on the height, particularly on the Laurel Street side, where the reason for going to the 6 stories was to move that building away from Laurel Street. It's stated right in the decision, the 2018 decision, and that was of particular concern to the public expressed. So I respectfully disagree with Mr. Proakis and my colleagues here, that Mr. Zucker, that this was directly relevant to the variances that were the location of this building was directly relevant to the variances that were issued, and it falls squarely within the Lessier case. The Lessier case dealt with just very small. It was one of the issues was it was a 21 by 22 size, and it was a little bit bigger than 21 by 22. It was also in addition to a garage, but it was the size, and it was only a little bit different, a little bit of an overhang. And it's the strictness with which variances are applied. The legislature's been clear and the SJC's been clear about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I could just respond to that, Madam Chair, just very briefly. This is David
Yes,
Zucker
please.
again. Again, everything that was built pursuant to the building permit plans is entirely within and well within the setbacks on all sides. So so that's the first point, is that nothing is changing to a point where it was previously not within a setback and now it is within a setback. Everything as far as setback dimensions go is well within the as of right dimensions. And as far as the Lessier case goes, the only way that in order for this case to be like that, what would have had to have happened here was that a 7th story would have to have been added onto the building, because that is what happened in that case. In that case, they were given a variance for a 1-story building, and they built a 2-story building that was within a setback. And that was the whole issue, is they had a variance to build a 1-story building in a setback, which is what required the variance, and they went ahead and built a 2-story building in the setback. Here, nothing that has changed has anything to do with the variance whatsoever, and the case law simply does not stand for the proposition that anytime you get a variance, if you make any change, no matter how minor, to anything within the project, even something that is unrelated to the relief granted in the variance, that you therefore have to go get a brand new variance. That would entirely eliminate the de minimis ordinance that Somerville has in effect.
Thank you. Anyone else? The board? No hands? Okay. Shall we go forward then with the, Mr. Proakis, did you have anything you wanted to say before we go to the public?
No, Madam Chair, I think the questions were well covered at this point, and
Great.
I mean, I think you understand where everybody stands. So no, I'm good.
Great. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, sorry to
Ms.
interrupt. I just wonder, before we move forward, do we have agreement between George and Ms. Morrow's attorney that the question that needs to be decided is whether the changes that were made, which have been represented in one graphic way anyway by Attorney Zucker, do we have agreement on the two sides that our board just needs to determine whether those were de minimis or not? I mean, I'm trying to understand what is actually being asked of us, because I don't quite understand yet.
Madam Chair, if I
Thank you.
may.
Yes, please.
Would you like,
Josh, I think the two questions in front of us are, one, we have Attorney Cahalan telling us that he believes that any change would need de novo review for a variance. And then we have Dave Zucker with Golston saying, and our staff attorney saying that a variance would require de novo review if the change was substantive. So I think we have two different issues in front of us. We've heard that there's case law saying that we don't have to necessarily re-examine everything. We've heard
Right.
that we have an approved variance that wasn't appealed during the appeals period. So then I think we also have to look at, are these changes substantive? But all of the changes from what I'm looking at were made to the setbacks, which those were not a part of the variance.
Right.
So, and Charlotte, you were going to say something. Do you agree with Catherine's summary?
This is Charlotte speaking. I do agree with Catherine's summary. Obviously, I believe that, as George said, that only substantive changes require de novo review, and that is the main, that whether or not the changes that were given de minimis approvals deserved those approvals is the main question.
yeah, listen,
That would be my summary.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Sorry,
Did
Charlotte,
I
could you say
hear
that again?
the? Charlotte,
Charlotte, would you mind repeating that?
Yes. So I agree with Catherine's summary, but I lean towards the side of really the question before the board, as I understand it. And there, I do disagree with Cahalan on this point. Is that the question before the board is, are the changes that were made to the plan substantive or not? Because as George said, the decision that the board issued and the conditions attached to that decision explicitly permit non-substantive changes that do not pass the level of de minimis, to be approved by staff. And so whether or not case law says that in most situations variances or changes require de novo review, when the board originally granted this decision, there was an explicit statement that if the changes are de minimis, they do not require a new hearing.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, just
Yes, George.
I'm just going to add another layer to Catherine and Charlotte's comments here, and I think the way she framed it is really interesting. So there's two questions to address, right? The first comes from Attorney Cahalan's letter today, which really is this question of whether or not there is a sort of automatic expectation that any change sends you back for de novo review. The second question then is if one makes the determination that that is not what the case law says, then the secondary question it relies back on our own ordinance, which is the question, is this de minimis, and or is it so substantive that it therefore needs de novo review? And where that line falls, is something that we can dig deeper, and I can answer questions on if you're interested. The August determination where they were making major changes to the garage, we thought was substantive. This particular one, where I think the most significant changes are some, a foot here and there, a couple feet. I think the one that deviates the most is that the first floor of the building in the far back corner lost a little wing that tucked out when the pool disappeared. So those are the two questions, I think. And I think as the first question goes, the point that I was trying to make on the first question is what I understand the circumstances to say, and the references to those case laws to say, is that they talk about circumstances where you're making changes to the variance itself, and they talk about the idea that you often rely on the local decision to answer that question. And what our local decision does is it offers you the de minimis review as an option, as a possibility. And because of that, that leans me towards trying to address the second question. But the first question is there, because certainly if you determined that de minimis isn't an available route to a variance case because of Mr. Cahalan's presentation, then I don't even think you need to answer the second question. I think it needs de novo review. But my position would be that de minimis is an available route. It's specific in our local ordinance. It's allowed. The case law is basically leaning towards the local ordinance to decide what can and cannot be done, and it is allowed, and that's what then puts us in that second question. That would be one way, and I certainly, if you don't mind taking the moment, I wouldn't mind you checking with each of the two attorneys to see if they frame it similarly to the way I framed the question, albeit maybe disagreeing upon what the answers are, but at least framing the question.
All right, thank you. Do the attorneys want to comment on this? Has Mr. Prowakis invited you to?
This is Dave Zucker for the developer again. I would agree with the way George framed the question.
George. Great. And the attorney for Mrs. Morrow?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right,
Yes,
I have my microphone turned off and I'm talking into it. Just this one qualification, because I think he framed it correctly, but the one qualification is that we're not saying that the law says any changes require de novo review. We're saying when you change the footprint, the law says you have to you have to have de novo review. And I understand their argument is only if that footprint is relevant to the variances. But as in general, yes. The question first is that whether you can even have a condition of non-de minimis changes in a with respect to a variance, given the law on that you can't have any, that they're strictly construed. Those plans are strictly construed. And whether you can make any changes to a footprint after a variance has been approved, that's the question one. That might be for council, for the board, for the city. And then the second one is, if you decide that you can, then you go to the de minimis determination by your de minimis determination as to whether this is something that would be visible to someone familiar with the project, essentially, and also important to the project because of the Laurel Street issue.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Yes, Madam Chair.
So I think if it's okay with everybody, unless you folks have any more questions for who's spoken already, have any concerns or required consideration, is there, do you have anything on the staff's memo right now? Or do you have any recommendations, or shall we go to the public? I'm willing to go to the public at this point. Yes, yes, everybody's shaking their heads. Charlotte would like to hear what the public has to say.
Very well, Madam Chair. For members of the public who have not been to a ZBA hearing before, the way that you express that you want to speak on this case is there is a button that looks like a hand. And if you click on that, it will notify staff that you wish to speak and we can unmute you. You can also just type in the chat that you wish to speak, but we cannot accept comments through the chat. You can only say that you wish to speak. Madam Chair, I am not seeing anyone indicating through the chat or by raising their hand that they wish to speak.
Okay.
If you would wish to speak, please raise your hand or chat by the time I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. There is still no one expressing that they wish to speak.
All right. Thank you. I think then I will close the public portion of this case, and we'll move on with the board with any concerns or questions they have, be it regarding the staff memo, be it any of the conditions that there are, or any other comments from the board members. I think we should just go forward with that while everybody's here, the attorneys for both parties and Mr. Prowaker. So without further ado, can we raise your hand if you would, if you have some statements or that you would help make your decision tonight? I see no one's hand up. Are you folks ready to go forward with our decision and take a vote? Can I see yes, yes? I see yes from Catherine. Josh and Ann, you ready to vote tonight?
If the rest of the board is, yeah.
Okay, Elaine, you're all set?
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to say before we go along and get a motion from the clerk, that I think everybody was really on tonight. Both the attorneys, and I appreciate Mr. Prowaker coming in and weighing in and clarifying some of the things for us. As long as now, I want to just look one thing as I'm shuffling my little papers here. Great. There's a lot of reading, a lot of presentation. Okay, so there are no conditions attached unless you have something you want to add to this. We all have our legal notice. We saw the summary of the proposal, all the comments. We got all the going back to history, the dates, the cases. So unless there's anything else, we will take a motion from the clerk on that we are going to deny or approve. So the recommendation was to deny. I think we should go forward with the motion to deny. And you will all vote either yes or no to deny. Am I right with that, Charlotte?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Safdie, could you please make a motion?
Madam Chair, with regard to 515 Somerville Ave, I make a motion that we deny the administrative appeal of the building inspector's decision of October 23rd, 2019 to issue 2 building permits for 515 Somerville Ave.
Thank you. May I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Elaine Severino. All, as we go around, I'll say your name. On the denial, please say yes to the denial. Josh Safdie,
Aye.
Ann Brockelman,
Yes.
Elaine Severino,
Yes.
Catherine Gavitt. Here we go, Catherine. I'm sorry. Catherine
Yes to the denial.
and Susan Fontano, yes for the denial. Let the record show that the denial is upheld and voted upon 5-0. Thank you all very much.
Madam Chair, this is Charlotte speaking.
Yes.
For the purposes
Yes,
of the record, is there anything that any
Yes.
member of the board would like to add on why you are denying it rather than just voting?
Well, I mean, I could ask a couple of the folks here to be a little articulate, but I think when I went around and asked everybody if the board had any concerns, and if the board wishes to anything that the staff had recommended or covered, and the additional conditions for the board. So for me, I can double check and give everybody a chance to say something, but I really felt the presentations were very thorough tonight. I think that everybody did what they thought was their homework, and I was pleased with the applicant, the attorney there for Ms. Morrow. I was happy with my staff report that I believe you prepared and Mr. Paleka spoke to, and I was happy with the attorney, Mr. Zucker, what he had to offer and with his demonstrations and his slides. So as far as I'm concerned, nothing changed tonight. Everything that we had been following with the de minimis changes. I mean, in any department that I've ever worked with, whether it be historic preservation or anything in the past, there are certain, you can't keep coming, and we have that right in our rules here. Every time somebody wants to change something, which is a minute change or a change because something else happened, once they speak with the office and they approve it, it doesn't have to come to us. We'd be in gridlock forever if we didn't have that freedom. So that's my answer to coming forward with the decision and the support this evening. Does anybody else want to say anything? Raise your hand, please. Catherine's saying no. Elaine, you are all set. Josh, I believe you spoke up. And Ann, would you like to say something?
I just was
Ann
going to say that,
Brockelman, for the record.
yes, I wanted to say that I agree. I think that it is practical and fitting that the planning office take a first pass to determine whether or not change is de minimis or not, and whether it should come to the board. And every once in a while, that's challenged. The public doesn't agree, that's completely okay. But in this case, I do believe it was de minimis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Anyone else? No? There you go, Ms. Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you for having us elaborate a little bit. I do realize it does make the record more complete. Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming tonight. And good luck with going forward with the project and make it a a nice thing for that Somerville Ave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, if we're all set to keep going forward, if everybody's in good shape, we're going to jump to 31 Tough Street, I believe.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct. Next on the agenda.
Okay. Who's, so we're going to open that up tonight.
Yes.
Mr. Bafty?
Madam Chair, the next case is 31 Tough Street. The applicant E3 Development LLC proposes to develop a pocket park in the urban residence district, which requires site plan approval.
Thank you. And so who is here from 31 Tough Street? Welcome.
That would be me, Adam Dash, here for 31 Tough Street applicant. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Mr. Dash, how you been?
Very good. I thought we would almost be seeing each other in person, and then they pulled the rug out from under us. So here we go.
You know, all the cast of characters, we're looking forward to seeing everybody as we go down the road.
And it's been
So
over a
bear
year
with
now.
us and, yeah. Well, it's good to hear your voice. Speak to us, please.
Absolutely. Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street in Somerville, representing E3 Development LLC, which is the developer of the 31 Tough Street property. Eliza Dada of E3 is here, along with Deborah Myers of DMLA, the designer, and Andres Bernal from Place Taylor, the architect. We're here tonight seeking site plan approval for the creation of a pocket park at 31 Tough Street, which is in the UR zone in Ward 1. And this project including a by right 100% affordable housing development, which abutting this new park. And that's not part of this going before the board because the building is by right. What's going before the board is a site plan approval just for the park. This has been through a lot of process. As Ms. Oliveira described earlier when she talked about the process, there have been 2 neighborhood meetings, there have been several visits with the Urban Design Commission, and obviously work with the planning staff to arrive at the design for the pocket park that's coming before you now. This has been going on for several years, this whole project. And we've followed the recommendations of the Urban Design Commission in putting together the park, which incorporates a lot of the neighbor requests. So the park site is currently a parking lot, but the applicant proposes to create a 5,360 square foot of open space, of which 4,520 square feet are landscaped in this congested, very heavily paved neighborhood. I'd like to turn it over to Deborah Myers to actually run through the site plan for you. Deb, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. My name is Deb Myers. I'm the project landscape architect from DMLA. Is there a way for me to share my slides?
This is Charlotte speaking. You have been made the presenter. Great, there you go.
Can you see the slides?
Yeah, I can see them, Charlotte. I can see it, Deb.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you for the introduction, Adam. 31 Tough Street, we're here tonight to talk about the civic space in the Pocket Park. So our project site is 31 Tufts. It's at the corner of Tuff Street and Glen Street, shown in the red square in the middle. This is zoomed in. You know, as Adam mentioned, our site is completely impervious right now. It's a parking lot with 2 adjacent. Well, this photograph does not show the newer, recently constructed multifamily housing to Project Northeast in this area. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. So our proposed project includes, so it's a very square site at the intersection of Tufts and Glen. We have the 3-story proposed building to the northwest, sort of page north at the top of the site. And then what we've done, and Louisa mentioned a lot of these sort of civic space goals, but the location of the park in this location we wanted it, the main intent of the siting was to make it feel very public, to make it feel open and inviting, to make it feel part of the neighborhood. In the beginning, we had shown the building in different locations, and we all feel, and with community input, feel that this location really makes for a very public feeling, very open park or civic space, as I should say. So the components of the space itself, we include the open space signage, which talks about sort of who to call for the maintenance, who to call if there's questions or concerns of anything that's happening in the park itself. We have a series of raised planters, both to protect the planting, to keep it contained, and to keep the pets and people from walking over it. So we have some raised beds. We have ample seating, some with backs, some without backs. We also have some mixed tables and other furnishings that will be able to be manipulated around the park. But just describe, I realize I'm kind of going all over the place here. So the main intent of the park itself, and again, like Adam mentioned, we had several community meetings. In fact, most of them, really before we were stopped having meetings. So a lot of, the input for this came from the neighborhood itself. I'm not showing the slides of all of the various parks and open spaces around this site, but it was really, what we heard most from the neighborhood was we want a place that feels like it's our park. We want a place that has multiple different areas within the space, for quiet gatherings, for, the birthday party, so it wasn't necessarily a park that wanted active play or anything of that nature. So we really, you'll see that in the space here, that it's very much, passive, places to walk, places to sit. We have some seasonal planting around the space, buffering and also protecting the windows from the residences here. We have a majority, sustainability and stormwater management is another goal of ours to really improve, and it's not hard to improve on a site that's completely paved. So this tan color here is all porous pavers. We do have some, concrete, for more of the tables and things that might be have a little more debris, but we'll have bike rack, the site signage. We have our transformer location here with access from Glenn Street. It'll have both buffer planting and a gate and a fence. We are also proposing a fence along the side property line for our butter, who we are communicating with at this time. Access in the front, I won't talk too much about the development site itself, but we have, concrete landing and stairs going up into the building. The next slide zooms in a little closer. So we have some street trees that will remain and be protected along the sidewalk. And again, we've really taken, I believe you have a plan of our planting plan, but we've really, we have a couple neighbors who are also gardeners and plant enthusiasts. So, they've asked for some things, and we've really tried to make this, the planting, including as many natives and appropriate trees as possible. We've selected some trees off the preferred Somerville plant list, and really wanting to make it feel less, certainly less commercial, and very much as if it was a neighborhood garden. So we think of this as a garden space. And to touch about maintenance, I know that is a hot button issue. And the developer, Eliza, has always said that even though this is a public space, it is adjacent to her, the building and her residence. So it'll be very much important to her that the space remains well kept and cared for. We do, as part of our work, create an operation and maintenance plan. And I've done, my firm has done a lot of public work, and also, affordable housing work, which often comes with maintenance, not challenges, but maintenance is a huge part of making things last and look good. So we don't overplant, we plant appropriately so things have room to grow in. I'm happy to answer, I could talk forever about the plants. So, but it's, really thinking about all the seasons, so there would be plenty of evergreens for the winter, nice branching also for the winter, possibly some berries and things, and then a full season of, spring and summer blooming.
So I guess this is Adam Dashkin. Thanks, Deb. I just wanted to note that to answer, I guess, some of the questions that came up during Luisa Oliveira's presentation, that the park will be maintained, owned, and insured by the developer, not the city. And again, I want to reiterate that that building that's being put there by right is 100% affordable as well. However, this park is open to the public. It is not just for this building. It is a public neighborhood park. It meets all the intents of the UR zoning district and creates a much needed gathering space and green space in this very urban neighborhood. It removes a fully paved, ugly parking lot. As you saw there, 14 trees are being added to the parking lot in addition to one on the building site for a total of 15 looking at the entire site. It's supported by the neighborhood and the Ward 1 Councilor McLaughlin, and it's the product of a lot of public process over several years. So the applicant would request that the ZBA grant the site plan approval for this proposed pocket park amenity for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dash. The answer, I had one little question. When Deb was making her presentation, she said about people want to have a little birthday party or what have you. Is that why the sign is up, that if somebody would like to reserve it, I'm not saying like 200 people. I mean, if they're going to go for a Sunday afternoon to let's go down the park and have a little birthday cake, it's a beautiful day. Do they have to ask permission of that?
Well, I should dash again. I would note for the record that the reason there's a sign up there is because the zoning requires a sign for a pocket park. So that's why the sign is going there. How the details get worked out in that regard, I don't think are fully vetted. I would say that it's a park, and like any park, you show up. If someone's there, they're there. If they're not, they're not. I don't know what the city's policy is about reserving public space like that for parties.
Yeah.
I would imagine if someone called the city and then they wanted to do something like that, I guess they could, but I'm not sure what the policy is about that.
Yeah, probably first come, first serve. If somebody's there, you see it. It's not like it's Foss Park, when it's so large. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's great. As I said earlier with Ms. Oliveria, this is down in my neck of the woods. A lot of stuff's been happening with the Green Line, and it's right in that area there. And I know this particular spot, Adam, goes way, way back with you.
Yeah.
We've both been around a while and seen it develop, so it's a very nice thing to see. Thank you so much for your presentation. Is anybody on the board here have any questions they'd like to ask to the landscape architect or to add? Yes, okay. Miss Elaine Severino, she's on Mrs. Green Jeans usually, Catherine. We'll give her a little slack there. Go ahead, Elaine.
I just had a question when I went down. I mean, I do know the site, and I've been down there before, but I went again. And the day I was there, the parking lot was probably 3/4 full with cars. I know the neighborhood is in favor of this. I just wondered, all the cars that were parked on this site, are they neighborhood cars, business? I just wondered, are all the people who own those cars, are they happy about the fact that this will no longer be a parking lot for them?
I mean, yeah, I can ask Eliza Data to maybe just talk about that, but this Adam Dash, but I could say that this is a city-owned property that was put out to RFP for bid, and Ms. Data, E3 Development was the winning bidder, and they've working on a land disposition agreement, which this approval is required in order to do. So this has been a public process for this parking lot to go away. It just happened that E3 Development was the winning bidder for this 100% affordable proposal with a park, because it's a great amenity for the neighborhood. But there was no scenario in which the parking lot stayed. I gotta say, I don't know who is parking there now, other than the fact it's a municipal facility. I don't know, Eliza, data from E3, do you have any answer to that?
Sorry, I'm just unmuting. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Good evening, everyone. This is Eliza Data with E3 Development. Thank you for the question tonight. So the question of parking did come up as we went through the community process with neighbors. Deb Myers mentioned that we had several meetings, and those early meetings, we focused on kind of the trade-offs that come with trying to site both building and open space on a small site like this. And we actually did some charrettes and spent quite a bit of time talking about the trade-offs between having parking on this site and having open space. And even though there were some neighbors who attended the meetings who did note the concerns about parking, the consensus at the end of that process was that there was a preference for having more and more usable open space. And so that's how we arrived at kind of the design that you're seeing today.
Thank you.
Okay, I just had another question. Should I ask now?
Yes, please do.
About the private, I know the building is by right, and next to the building is a private amenity space. Is that only available to the people in that building?
So Adam Dash, you're talking about the one at the top of the plan there that's not on the pocket park? Yeah, that's not part of the public open space.
No.
Because as you know,
Who does that belong to?
well, for any housing project, there has to be there's an amenity space requirement, as you know, under the new zoning. So this is that outdoor amenity space for the building, which is required under zoning, but that's in addition to the park.
Right, but to answer
not
Elaine's
public.
story, Elaine, that goes to the building.
Correct. Yes.
It's private building.
And that's a zoning requirement that there be outdoor amenity
Sure.
space for the units. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Catherine Garavaglia, you're next.
Hi, Attorney Dash, I just had a quick question about how the conveyancing of the pocket park is going to happen. You said that the developer owner is going to retain ownership, so I'm assuming you mean fee simple. So is the city getting an easement, or is this a license?
I guess, Catherine, thank you, Adam Dash, again. I know Eliza's been working more on that LDA piece with the city and going through the city council, and that the property is going to be disposed of, and the title go to E3 or its designee, and then it would be, as an open space, has open spaces that are publicly accessible. I did the one at Metro 9 that Ms. Oliveira talked about earlier on 9 Medford Street. And that was just done. It's owned by the Metro 9 condominium, and it is just open to the public as a condition of our approval for doing that building. But Eliza, do you have any detail about how that's going to work going forward?
Don't have all the detail worked out yet, but that concept that you just described, Adam, is what we've been discussing with the city.
Yeah, which is how I've done some LDA work before with the parks that came up with the Powder House School as well. With some open space there, because remember the Powder House School was also there was an RFP that was put out, and an LDA was done with the city, and then a public park was built and all that. So this isn't the first go around for me, and not the first go around for the city in something like this. And as Louisa said, this is just the first go around under the new zoning for this. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of these site plan approvals of little pocket parks like this around. It's the general concept isn't new to the city.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Catherine.
Madam Chair,
Who's speaking?
this is Charlotte speaking. I
Yes,
believe Tom Galligani, Director of Economic Development, may be able to expand on that answer. He is present if you would like to speak.
Hi, this is Tom Galligani speaking. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Tom Galligani. I serve as the Director of Economic Development for the City of Somerville, and my team is responsible for selling this vacant city-owned parking lot known as 31 Tufts Street. And, you know, prior to the pandemic, my team took guidance from the administration and from the City Council to issue this RFP to sell and redevelop this vacant lot. So hopefully it would yield affordable housing in a new neighborhood park. And so we've been working with the team at E3 to make this project happen. And we've been delighted to work with them over the last, now 18 months or so. And it is our intention, and it has been our expressed intention and the intention of the City Council and the administration to make sure that that space is public. It's an open space. It feels like a neighborhood park. It feels public. And even though E3 will retain ownership to that park, we'll have conditions in place to ensure that it looks like a park, feels like a park, and is maintained like a public open space. So all those details are still being worked out and will be articulated in our land development agreement, just like Attorney Dash mentioned. And this is something that we've done with a number of different parcels across the city. Most recently with the Powder House School, which, as you know, was a city-owned parcel that has now been redeveloped by a private entity. But I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Yeah, and Adam Dash again. Tom's exactly correct. And if you look in the staff report, I believe there is a statement in there with a proposed permit condition that the property owner is responsible for all associated maintenance, security, insurance, and other applicable costs associated with the pocket park. And then that will be fleshed out in the land development agreement between the city and the owner prior to the deed being conveyed, which is how we've done that in prior deals like this. So this really doesn't go into the zoning decision. You're just going to allow us to build the pocket park in this fashion, and then all those details get worked out when the property gets conveyed over through a contract.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else on the board have a question? Yes, Josh Sapti.
A couple comments about the conversation that's happening right now. You know, in my professional world, it would make a big difference as to whether this was actually city property or property of the, or private property, basically. If this is developed as common use space at a multifamily property, it's subject to accessibility requirements of the Fair Housing Act and of the state accessibility code. If it was property of the city, it would be subject to the ADA and the state accessibility code. And the Fair Housing Act and the ADA have some significant differences in terms of their requirements for access. And so, I mean, I'm all for the project and I don't want to hold it up in any way. I'm just kind of raising these issues for the benefit of staff more than anything else to think about this as we're moving forward with more of these. There'd be another way to think about it, which is that if the city, I mean, the city is not operating it, right? The city is not holding programs in it. And so there really wouldn't be any way to, in my opinion anyway, my nascent opinion, having just thought about this for the first time with this project, but there wouldn't be any way to consider it a program or service of the city and therefore be subject to ADA requirements under Title II. But it seems to me as though the city's intent is for it to be that way. And so from my perspective, I would rather see it designed as though it were a place of public accommodation and subject to ADA requirements, as opposed to common use space within a multifamily development, which is covered by the FHA. So that's sort of the broader picture. And I just wanted to raise that, as I said, for staff to think about. I have some specific accessibility related comments, I think, more than questions. And I understand that what we're discussing today is the part which is outlined in magenta on the image in front of us, but I just wanted to point out that the stairs shown leading up to the building aren't showing handrails. I just want to make sure that the landscape architecture team is on the fact that they're going to need handrails. The ramp is shown in a grading plan in the record set at 5.9%, which means it also needs handrails, which aren't shown. And then, I wonder about the intention, and this gets back to what Ms. Oliveira said at the beginning, the intention of having these be as inclusive spaces as possible. From an accessibility standpoint, there are certainly missed opportunities in this landscape design that I would love to see taken advantage of before we get to construction. And I think, generally, and again, this is partly conversation for staff and then partly specific to this project. The U.S. Access Board 7 or 8 years ago now issued guidelines on the accessibility of public rights of way, and they have suggestions which someday may become requirements for best practices in inclusive design. One of them that I think would really be beneficial here is a requirement that 50% of all bench seating have a clear floor space next to it, which would allow somebody who's using a mobility device to transfer sideways onto that bench. It's also a much more convenient location for parents with strollers or people with shopping carts to place those wheeled items. And so these long curvilinear benches don't really have that feature. It's one that could be easily, incorporated. So the bigger question for the city is, when we say that we want these new parks to be as inclusive and welcoming as possible, what kind of design criteria are we bringing to bear to make sure that happens? Because I didn't really hear any in the presentation we had at the beginning of session. I just heard a sort of a desire for that. So sorry, my monologue is almost over. Just one specific question in addition to these general comments. There's currently a curb ramp at Glen Street and a crosswalk leading across Glen Street, heading east based on the north arrow in this plan. And I just want to confirm, because the site plan doesn't show it, I want to confirm that if this sidewalk is being rebuilt, that the curb ramp is going to go back in there. And if it's not being rebuilt, that we'll be mindful of preserving that curb ramp so that that crosswalk remains accessible.
I guess Adam Dash again. I'm sorry. Was that a question? I'm sorry.
Adam, who are you addressing?
Oh, I was addressing you, Madam Chair. I don't know if you wanted me to answer Mr. Softy's question or that was just a comment.
Well,
yeah, I would like to hear confirmation that that curb ramp is going to be in there.
That's what I thought. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I don't know if Deb or Andres Bernal, are you there about the sidewalk?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond, and I appreciate those comments quite a bit. Of course, I always try to include as much universal accessibility as possible. And I think the comments about the ramp and the stair railings, of course, I think those are part of the architectural design, and that given that our set was about the civic space, those have not been sort of brought up to the same level. So well aware of the MAB and the ADA codes. And then I think your points about the inclusive design and the bench transfers, I think those are really well taken. And I think you're right that the radius might not be as easy to do that, but we will look at the furniture specifications for any of the furniture that we're including. And then we can look also at ways to truncate some of those benches, or even make some of them maybe more conducive to the transfer aspect. So thank you for your comments.
And the sidewalk with the ramps, Deb?
Yeah, so we have no intention of unless they really need to get redone. Our intent is not to replace the public sidewalks, but if we do in the course of construction, they will go back where the access is. We would never eliminate a ramp in a public right of way.
And so, Deb, does that mean that because So there are no new street trees going in. The new
No,
trees
that's
you
correct.
mentioned earlier are on the site.
These are all there.
Yeah. And so does that mean then that the existing curb cut at the northeast corner where the transformer is now, that existing curb cut would remain in place?
That's correct. We'd only be going back a sidewalk in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, for me, because I do look at these drawings through a particular lens, I think it's always helpful to include that information in site plans, even if even if you're not touching it, because it helps us understand how a public park is actually going to be accessed by the public.
Certainly.
So, thanks, Madam Chair. I don't have anything else.
Thank you for your expertise, Josh. We can always count on you to come forward with some of this stuff because, it's unfortunate that sometimes we think of this as such automatic in the norm, and it's things that fall through the cracks. So thank you for bringing it to our attention and, of course, all the participating parties. And I'm sure they'll all go back to their drawing boards and see how they can cooperate. Thank you very much. And
Madam
Brock, yes, hello, who's calling?
Madam Chair, this is Rebecca Cooper, Senior Planner with OSPCD. If
Hi,
I
Rebecca.
may, hi, if I may offer one added element for the board to consider, and for you to Mr. Safdie, Mr. Dash and Ms. Data are correct, Ms. Myers are correct that the building part of the set is subject to different review. However, site plan approval is administrative review for a conforming project and can have conditions added to it to mitigate impacts on a neighborhood. So if Mr. Safdie wanted to condition the addition of or the study of the seating City is interested in seeing, or if the board wished to add a condition about the replacement of any sidewalk amenities in the public realm as part of this, we can do that. All you would need to do would be to identify the outcome that you'd like us to reach for, and we'll craft language for you.
Thank you very, very much. I think that is something we might want to do, not to, complicate anything, but to make it a better project. So, Josh, I'm going to ask you to write something up there in front of you, the subjects you brought up, while we listen to what Ann Brockelman has to say, if you would be so kind, and then we can come back to you as soon as we finish with Ann. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Ann Brockelman, you're on.
Just a simple question. I wasn't clear on where the fencing is, just because graphically the pink line and there's some black dash lines. Is this fenced in? Could you maybe with your cursor trace the fence?
Yeah, so the fencing occurs, there is a gate and a fence on these two. It is a little hard to see on the graphic. And then there's the perimeter fence, which is going to be a tall, opaque 6-foot fence that essentially goes from the corner of the property line down to the building face. And the park itself is not gated. It is not fenced in. It is completely flush with access at three different entrances.
Okay, so that's just a material change between the sidewalk and the pavers. That's
correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Excuse me, I couldn't quite hear you. Who was speaking?
Sorry, that was Deborah Myers responding.
Deborah. Thanks,
Yes.
Deborah. Could you just elaborate again on that? So you're saying there's a 6-foot fence going to go up to all, you're drawing from the other, I thought that other section down there was part of the development and the park is separate.
Deb, I think we're just talking about the park fencing.
Yeah, so the park fencing was really just around the transformer. Sorry.
So all this magenta, this pink color that goes around the perimeter, Is that just to show the park? It's not fencing?
Yes, so that, there is
Okay.
a certain square feet that all our calculations are based on for the green score. So the magenta line is the outline of our space square feet.
Okay. And you're saying, though, there will be a fence, 6-foot fence, that is behind the park for that building that's going up?
It's on the building part of the project.
Right.
It's all the neighbors, that's correct.
Oh, good. Okay, is that answer your question, Ann? Was that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So the park is all wide open? Yeah.
Open, yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. Okay, thank you, Ann. Elaine, did you have something before we go back to Josh or to Catherine?
No, I think I've already answered or asked my question.
Beautiful, thank you. And Catherine, anything before we go back to Josh for his comments? No. Okay, so Josh, did you write up something that we could add as like a condition?
I did, Madam Chair. I just want to, I'm sensitive to conditions sometimes not being conducive to design thinking, right? That
Yeah,
sometimes
no, I
they
get it.
tend to, and I don't want to, I want to be careful not to say anything that adds unanticipated cost, even if it's beneficial to the project. And so,
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I think there were I generally had two comments. One is that there may be other ways to incorporate design elements into the general plan that might make the plan more accessible. And then my second one is more specific about, the curb ramp at the corner of Glen and Tufts, right? So for the first one, and I'm just offering this up to see what everyone thinks of it, because I'm trying to strike a reasonable balance. I would add a condition that says the applicant and design team shall work with planning staff to incorporate, or shall make reasonable efforts to work with planning staff to incorporate design elements consistent with the U.S. Access Board's public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, right? So I'm trying to point them to a design standard and ask them to make reasonable efforts to, do what they can, but I don't want to impose anything which is specifically limiting.
And ties their hands. I get it.
Yeah. So I guess I'd put that question to Attorney Dash as a representative for the applicant. Would that be, would that language in the condition be acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you know, this project is 100% affordable housing, building, and a park, so it's not a luxury high profit type of operation here. I appreciate Mr. Softy taking into account the impact financially of this, because this is not being done for massive profit. I guess Ms. Data, I think the wording of that sounds fair to make reasonable efforts, but I guess Ms. Data would have to state whether, this is normally the part where I would lean over and talk to my client out of your hearing and ask her the question, but I cannot do that at the moment. So unfortunately, Eliza, what do you think?
I think the wording and the intent there is reasonable, so we can live with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Josh.
Adam, you haven't learned yet to set up the separate Google chat on the other screen during these public.
Well, you assume I'm not texting, but nevertheless, I mean, or emailing with people, but it's harder.
And then, the other thing about the curb ramp is that, Madam Chair, the applicant doesn't have any control over the curb ramp, right? I mean, that's city property, which is not part of the handing over of the property. So I don't know what to do about that, other than to say that when site crews are there and on site, if there's a non-compliant curb ramp, which is the only access to the sidewalk which leads to this public park, it would probably behoove the city to make sure that the curb ramp there is actually accessible. But I don't know that we can add any condition to this applicant's zoning decision that would make that happen.
No, I would think that that would be something that our staff would just have to follow through and just at some point take a little peek, or, if they're crossing the T's and dotting the I's, they might take a look at that. Thank you so much. So I think we need to still open this up to the public. Yes, Charlotte?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
I think at this point we can do that if you would, please.
So for anyone who was not here earlier, the way that you indicate that you wish to speak is by raising your hand or messaging in the chat just that you would wish to speak. I see one hand raised so far from David Last. David, you are unmuted. You may have to unmute yourself. And by may, I mean you will need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for taking the time to review this. I want to first off say that Eliza has been a great partner with the community. I also want to thank you, Elaine, for bringing up the parking. I think Mr. Dash may have mischaracterized the situation. The parking is a big community concern and came up multiple times during the community meetings. The reason for this is that Tough Street used to have street parking. It no longer has street parking because during the Green Line construction and the Washington Street Bridge closure, it was made wide enough to accommodate buses, and they got rid of all parking on the street. So it's not just who's parking up there, it's actually that people who live on Tough Street have nowhere to park except for that parking lot. There were options that showed parking, and myself included agreed that really hindered the benefit of the park. And the park is a beautiful and wonderful amenity, which I believe the community strongly desires, and which I should have started off by saying I'm the neighbor who I'm overlooking the parking lot right now. So I'm literally the neighbor that is next door to them. That's not the new development. Yep. And so I do support this project. I do want to commend Eliza and E3 for their involvement in the community. I do also want to very strongly say that my support, and I believe many of the other community support, was based on understanding from the city that parking would be restored on Tough Street before any development would take place there. As again, anyone who has lived on Tough Street who doesn't have a driveway has literally no parking aside from that parking lot currently. I've been assured via email from Brad Rawson in traffic and parking that they are working on this. I don't know if that's a condition that's allowed to be put on, but I would certainly want that to be taken into consideration. That for people who public transit is not an option, even with the Green Line extension, we literally would have nowhere to park. So again, I am in favor of this project. Again, want to thank Eliza for the community involvement and for the reaching out. She has been, again, a wonderful partner. I just do want to make sure that we take very strong consideration into how this is phased relative to restoring parking on Tough Street to accommodate the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Last.
Next up is Sam Latronica. Sam, you are unmuted.
Thank you, everyone, Madam Chair. Board, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I just want to take a moment to express my support for the park here. As some of you may know, I'm the housing director for the Somerville Community Corporation, and we are the other abutter on the other side of the on the right side of the screen, who are currently wrapping up the 163 Glen Affordable Condo project. So as the other abutter, I want to express our support for the park here, which will be, accessible to our residents. It'll be a great benefit for the neighborhood, for both the immediate abutters and others in the neighborhood as well. Of course, we support additional affordable housing in the neighborhood, and I very much appreciate the developer's response to the issue of accessibility and the willingness to work on that as well. So very much in support of this park here in this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we also have a written statement that I believe Rebecca Cooper can read for the record. Other than that, it does not look like we have any public comments remaining.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cooper?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Let me get this up in front of me. I spoke with Councillor McLaughlin, who is unfortunately unable to be here this evening because he needs to be present for the last night of the city budget hearing. He wrote me a statement and I will read it now. I would like to express my support for the proposal at 31 Tough Street. I held several community meetings as well as in-depth conversations with residents and believe the neighborhood is in support. The project is a wonderful blend of affordable housing and open space, two things the community desperately needs. I request approval of this project barring concerns from the ZBA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rebecca. So let's close the, and you see nobody else out there, Ms. Charlotte, that would like to speak
That's
from the
correct.
public?
I do not
Okay.
see anyone else.
All right, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for coming forward, and I will close the public portion of the meeting now. The board seems to have really had some expressed themselves and had some good ideas and good questions that they had for the different powers to be of this project. So unless somebody else has any other comments, the board, any other concerns that we didn't cover, you can raise your hand, please. Do you have any other wishes to apply from the state? You know, the staff recommendations about the permits. We're gonna, how did we say we're gonna address Josh's? Are we gonna have a little condition in there the way he said it and stated it? Yes? Charlotte?
Madam
Yes,
Chair, this is
Rebecca, go ahead.
Yes,
Madam
Rebecca.
Chair. Madam Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I expect that Charlotte and I are going to say the same thing, which is we took the text that was read out as agreed to by the applicant, and that will add that to the petition.
Thank you. And are there any other additional comments or conditions you'd like to hear from the board? The board, that's your final question here. Are you happy with everything? You want to go forward? Are you willing to? Elaine Severino.
I think one of the speakers from the public mentioned something about, he talked with the traffic director and mentioned something about a condition or whether it was possible or not regarding that parking being put back on Tough Street. So I don't know if that is a possibility to address what his concern was.
I have no,
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, Adam Dash again. As with the ramp that we discussed earlier, it's off property and it's city property. I don't think it's something that can be conditioned of a property owner to require the city to put on-street parking on land that we have no control over whatsoever. Obviously, I don't think we have any problem with it. I probably would support it, but I don't think it's something that's within our control.
No, I don't either. I'm only trying to see if Rebecca or Charlotte have a comment on, it was stated by by Mr. Who was it, David Last, that they have spoken with Brad Ross and the parking department, and I'm sure that they're working on it. I know that's Brad's thing, all the parking, what have you. So I don't know if that's enough to say that. If any comment we can add is just that we ask that the city, Mr. Ross, and the parking department continue to work with the neighborhood in getting some parking back. But to make it a condition of this project, I don't think it would really behoove us. I think it would hurt the project.
Madam Chair, this is Rebecca speaking, if I may.
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, you are correct. The challenge of site plan approval is it's not a discretionary process. Unlike asking that an applicant or a property owner repair something that is damaged, repair city property that is damaged through the construction activity, a condition on a site plan approval cannot be used to direct a city staff member or a city department to undertake anything. That said, I am aware that the mobility department is very closely studying the disposition of parking in this neighborhood as well as in other locations not too far away. And I do know that that effort is ongoing. It's obviously quite complicated, but I have been aware of the diligent efforts of my colleagues in mobility to figure this out.
Great. Thank you very much. I do appreciate your comments. So if everybody's content and been satisfied, I would like to go forward with this tonight. Shall we?
Madam Chair?
Yes. Catherine? Yes, dear. Catherine
So sorry,
Garavaglia.
just so I understand what we would be including in our decision, in addition to Josh's comment regarding accessibility guidelines, there are a number of conditions that were in the staff report. Those are getting included as well.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Sure.
It's Rebecca speaking again. I wanted to cover a point of procedure just because this is a different type of approval for this board. It's the type of approval that we on the planning board are more familiar with. The process typically has been a multi-part process. And thank you very much to Ms. Garavaglia's question. I had practiced that. I do apologize. So the first bit of business that the board needs to do as part of a site plan approval is quickly go over the required considerations that are laid out in the staff report. Note essentially that you have considered the three of them for this particular approval are that you find that the board finds that it's in, well, the board would examine the project with regard to the comprehensive plan and existing policy plan with regard to the intent of the zoning district, and then would discuss any mitigation that that the board feels is necessary to alleviate any impacts that are directly attributable to the proposed development. Then typically the board, the planning board has done this by taking a vote to include conditions as amended, include the recommended conditions and any additional conditions that have been proposed by the board, and then finally take a vote to grant or not grant the site plan approval.
Okay. Well, I see here everything's in our staff report. And I thought that we asked if there was any other required consideration, you know, or the staff recommendations and conditions. So I was thinking we were just going forward and adopting the conditions and the recommendations as presented in the staff report. No?
Yes, Madam Chair, Rebecca speaking. You can vote to adopt all of the recommended conditions, including the one proposed this evening, and then move on to the vote for the site plan approval.
Okay. Josh, you have this?
I believe so, Madam Chair.
I think so as well. If we don't have this right, Rebecca, don't be shy, speak up, okay?
Madam Chair, if you'll give me just 1 minute, I can give Mr. Safdie the language that we typically use.
Okay, thank you.
Which I will say has been vetted by Mr. Bartman, who we all rely on when it comes to conforming with the code.
Okay.
Mr. Safdie, I am putting the format of that in the chat, and I will quickly go over it for the virtue of the whole board. It is following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the zoning ordinance, and then you would add your motion.
Okay, great. So we had sort of informally been in the habit of using a phrase, something like incorporating the facts and findings of the staff report dated blah, blah, blah. It sounds like that's covered by review of submitted materials and deliberation, and I don't need to say that anymore.
Madam Chair, through you, Mr. Safdie, that is correct.
Yes, thank you.
So Madam Chair, shall I give it a shot?
Yes, please, Josh.
Okay.
I'm learning too. Go ahead.
In the matter of 31 Tufts Street,
Yeah.
following public testimony, review of the submitted materials, and the deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, I make a motion to approve the site plan, to approve the site plan or to provide site plan approval.
To approve the application for site plan approval.
To approve the application for site plan approval with the conditions included in the staff report, plus one additional condition that was earlier read into the record and will be added to the staff report.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. May I have a second on the motion, please?
Second.
Elaine Severino, second. All in favor of the approval of 31 Tufts Street, P&Z 20-004, please say aye. Ann Brockelman,
Aye.
Elaine Severino,
Aye.
Catherine Garavaglia,
Aye.
Josh Safdie,
Aye.
and Susan Fontano, aye. Let the record show there was a 5 unanimous for, 0 against. Good luck and thank you everyone for explaining this all to us and helping us along with this. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess if I may, just for Rebecca, was that the only vote that needs to happen, or were there 2 votes?
The planning board, my apologies, Rebecca, this is Rebecca speaking. The planning board sometimes does it in 2 votes, but Mr. Safdie did explicitly include the conditions as amended this evening, so that will be sufficient.
That works for me. Just wanted to make sure with this new process, we weren't skipping anything. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Adam.
everyone.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Rebecca. Good night.
Madam Chair,
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Elaine?
can we have a 2-minute break before the next case?
Yes, 2 minutes, everyone. Oh, do we have to vote on that? Charlotte?
I think we need to vote on that.
I think so too. Okay.
Just
There's
for the
been,
record.
a request to take a 2-minute recess. I'd like to take a vote as we go around. Please say aye if you're interested and would like to. Elaine Severino,
Aye.
Josh Safdie,
Aye.
Ann Brockelman,
Aye.
Catherine Garavaglia, and Susan Fontano, aye. Unanimous aye. Let's take a break. Thank you.
Thank you. We will reconvene at approximately 8:14.
Thank you. That. Ann, can you hear me? Ann,
Yes.
can you hear me? I don't want to say
Yeah.
anything. But it must be good company for you because you look so much better than you did earlier tonight. Are you thriving on this?
I'm ready for bed.
Oh, well, we're pulling up the end now.
Yeah. I'm on a Dayquil, NyQuil.
Yeah, you'll sleep. You'll sleep. Who are we missing here? Catherine. We're all here? Charlotte,
Yes, Madam Chair.
are you here?
Yes.
Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. It's 8:19. And our next and final case for this evening is 27 Loring Street. That's P&Z 21-004. It's a new case. Would the clerk please open it for us?
Madam Chair, this is 27 Loring Street. Applicants Kyle and Jovi Conroy propose adding a half-story to a cottage building type, which requires 2 hardship variances.
Thank you. Good evening. Are our applicants here?
Yes, I am unmuting Kyle and Jovi Conroy and Sam Katchmar, who's the architect. If any of you would like to share your screen, please just let me know, but you will need to unmute yourself before you can speak.
Sam Katchmar here from Sam Katchmar Architects.
Hello?
Hello,
Hi, who's speaking?
Sam Ketchmar from SKA. I'm here on behalf of the applicant and the architect.
Are you on a speakerphone? You're not coming across very well.
I'll move a little closer to the microphone. Can you hear me better now?
Much better, thank you. So Sam, go ahead, please. Welcome.
Can we share our screen, Charlotte?
Yes, I will make you the presenter. Give me 1 minute and you should be able to share your screen.
Are you guys able to see our screen now?
Not yet.
Okay. Charlotte, are we able to share our screen now?
Yes, on my end, you have abilities to share your screen.
Give us one.
There's, on your control panel, there should be like 3 buttons that are currently dark gray, a microphone, a camera, and a little
screen.
A little screen. Yeah, if the screen is green, we should be able to see your screen. And if the screen is not green, that means we are unable to.
Yes. We clicked it and it is green, but you guys are not able to see our screen yet?
No.
No.
Okay.
It's not going to be able to share the screen.
Do you have, Charlotte, do you have our drawings? Could you share your screen on that?
I can share. Do you need just the drawings that you sent me and that are posted online?
Yeah, that would be fine. I believe those are like the 514 drawings.
Yes. They're the 5-4 drawings.
554, I'm sorry.
Yes, I can share my screen.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Can everybody see our screen now?
Yes.
See Charlotte's screen, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you, members of the board and Madam Chair, for your time this evening. My name is Sam Ketchmar from SKA. I'm here with Tiffany Frary and Stephen Kohab on behalf of our clients, the Conroy family. This project is an update to an existing cottage or detached house. We're not quite sure. It seems like it's a little bit larger than those dimensions. But we come before you this evening to request 2 hardship variances to enable us to raise the roof and transform this 2-story home into a 2.5-story home to create more livable space for this young and growing family. Before we go through our presentation, we'd like to just have Kyle and Joey introduce themselves and speak to their investment in this home and this community. Kyle and Joey, are you guys on the line?
Yes, we are. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So we're my husband and I are here. We are Jovi and Kyle, as Sam was saying, and we have lived in Boston for about 15 years and in Somerville for 7 years. We used to live in a 1-bedroom condo in Winter Hill, but we wanted to have kids, so we decided to look for a home with more space. We love living in Somerville because it's such a vibrant community with many young families. So over the years, we've made so many connections, from walking the bike path with friends to frequenting small businesses like Winter Hill Bakery to Reliable Market. So 2 years ago, when we got married and decided to showcase the city we had come to call home by holding a celebrations at Sarma. So when we decided to look for a new place, we knew that our home would stay in Somerville. So after searching for 3 years, we were fortunate enough to have our offer accepted last summer on 27 Loring Street. We plan on making this our forever home, but it needs like a full renovation. So we've engaged Sam to help us bring it up to code and update the layout. We're very much looking forward to completing the renovations and moving in and starting our family in the next year or so. So thank you so much for listening to our case and for for this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll just run you guys through the drawings real quick, and then we can answer any questions or go through a discussion there after that.
Okay, but you have to speak into that, get closer.
All right, I will speak
That's
loud.
what I
Sorry, I might have been mumbling. Here on page 1, we see the facade of the existing house relative to the proposed. The design intends to preserve much of the existing character of the home. Next sheet, please, Charlotte. This sheet's just our general notes. We can go to the next sheet. This sheet shows the existing area plans versus the proposed area plans for the increased square footage. We can go to the next sheet, please. This sheet on page 4 shows the existing versus the proposed site, and all the changes of the home will occur within the existing footprint. We'd also just like to highlight that the proposed reduction of the size of the existing garage structure from 2 bays to a single bay will allow for more green space for the Conroys. That's a priority for this family. The location of the garage won't change. It's going to stay a pre-existing non-conforming structure. We're hoping to create more permeable space on the site. This site is directly uphill of Ward 2, which has significant flooding issues and has for like about the past 100 years. Could we go to the next sheet, please? On this sheet, we show the shadow studies that we conducted for what the existing versus the proposed structure will look like. In both the summer and winter solstices, from what we're proposing, there's not a significant difference in terms of what any of the neighbors will really receive in terms of shadows. In the deep winter at like 3 p.m., some of the shadows will hit some of the other houses, but other than that, there's really an insignificant change to there. Next sheet, please. This sheet shows the fenestration calculations and the lot coverage at 34% for the submission. Next sheet, please. And then on this sheet, we just show the existing versus the proposed basement. No real changes to there. I'm not planning to finish that or anything like that. It kind of floods significantly in the area. Next sheet, please. On the first floor, you can see where we're maintaining the existing footprint. You can see we plan to convert the existing covered porch into a mudroom and an engaged porch. After consulting with Charlotte from the ZBA, we've modified our design so that the changes will conform to the Somerville zoning requirements. Next sheet, please. And then here we can see the existing versus proposed design for level 2, which mostly just involves a minor variation in the stairs going from level 1 to level 3. Most of the other rooms are going to remain in their same location. Next sheet, please. And then here on level 3 is really where we're asking for the hardship variances. This is where you can see the existing versus the proposed. We're requesting the 2 hardships. One for exceeding the maximum number of stories permitted for a cottage building type, and the second for violating the standards of a half-story. We propose to raise the roof height by about 4 feet so that a half-story living space will replace the unfinished attic as it currently is. This plan will allow for the addition of a master suite and create much-needed bedroom, bathroom, and closet space for the Conroy's growing family. Next sheet, please. And here we see the existing versus the proposed roof, and incorporating the addition of some skylights for natural light. Next sheet, please. And here we see the proposed garage design, eliminating one of the 2 existing bays to add additional green space to the site. Again, this change will create more permeable space on a site that's uphill from Ward 2. Next slide, please. Here we see the existing south elevation versus the proposed. Next slide, please. And here we see the existing east elevation versus proposed. Next slide again. And here's the existing north, showing where we've kind of increased the amount of natural light to the backyard in an effort to create more of a connection from the rear kitchen into the backyard space to create a little bit more flow between the indoor and outdoor space on the site. Next slide, please. And here we show the west elevation versus the proposed, which is sort of facing uphill. Next slide, please. On this streetscape, you can see where Loring Street is sloping down towards Ward 2, and then you can see our proposed render showing the proposed site. Next slide. And you can see the same thing from a different angle. This is from uphill on the site looking down towards Ward 2. Next slide, please. These are just some building sections of the house showing the differential between the existing and then the proposed. And then if we could look at the next slide, please, again. No, I think that went backwards on us. And then these are just some of the additional plans and reflected ceiling plans. But so mostly just to wrap up our presentation, these are just a few of the reasons that necessitate a vertical expansion to this property as opposed to a horizontal one. A design that expands the footprint of the home into the backyard levels on level 1 and 2 could be done by right, but the reason that we're here pursuing this variance is that the Conroys are really invested in maintaining, by the way of reducing the garage size and by expanding vertically, to expand the green space in their backyard. In addition to the first floor, would decrease their yard space considerably and make it more difficult to achieve an ideal green score. With the goal to work with a higher green score, the Conroys hope to achieve better environmental sustainability on the property. Flooding has been an ongoing and pervasive issue in Somerville, particularly in Ward 2. An expansion to level 1 has the potential to increase the impermeable area and ground space that would not absorb stormwater on this site. In addition, a first floor expansion would affect the adjacent homes more adversely than our proposed design, with the creation of additional shadows. And the final consideration for these hardships is financial. An expansion into the backyard on levels 1 and 2 would create a financial hardship for the Conroys. Construction costs to raise the roof and add a third story are significantly less than pouring foundation and framing out an addition on levels 1 and 2. In short, a third story addition is financially feasible for this family in the way of an expansion and a second story is not. It results in the least impact on the neighborhood and it preserves the maximum amount of green space possible. It leaves the most permeable space to absorb groundwater. And it's for these reasons that we request that the 2 hardship variances be granted. This concludes our presentation. Please note, I think there's 4 letters of support from the Conroy's neighbors. And thank you for your time, and we're happy to go over any questions that we can on the project.
Thank you. Is there anyone here, Charlotte, from the public?
Madam Chair, I'm really going to butcher this, and I'm sorry. Niklesh Gronki is here. I'm really sorry. You are unmuted.
Hello? Hello?
Niklesh, you'll need to unmute your end, but you are unmuted from my end.
Charlotte, how do you spell the last name of this speaker?
G-O-R-U-K-A-N-T-I. And they appear to be unmuted and able to speak.
Hello?
Sometimes, this is Charlotte speaking, sometimes people have issues with their computer audio. If you would like to try changing your audio type from computer audio to calling in, that may work better and can sometimes solve people's technical issues. Beyond that, I don't have suggestions to give on how to be heard. If there is anyone else who wishes to speak while we wait for Niklesh to change their audio type, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. Or send a chat message and we can unmute you.
Anyone stepping up?
Can you hear me?
Hello, who's speaking?
This is Niklesh Gorkanti. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you so
I
much.
am so sorry that anyways, my name is Niklesh Gorkanti. I live on 30 Granite Street, 2 houses down. I also own like a small business on 365 Somerville Ave. I would like to support for like modification of his home. This will allow for him to get more livable space, as the houses that was built ages ago was done so inefficiently, you know. In addition, this would allow their family to stay and grow his family in a safe home, to change it into a well-maintained house and improve our street look as well. And not to mention, when you have kids, you know, these improvements will help like make sure that they're safe, like, you know, as there are so many things that can go wrong in an old house, you know. That's all I would like to say.
And you're at 30 Loring?
The 30 Granite Street, like it's like 2 houses down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And what kind of business do you have, Nicholas?
It's a small dental office on 365 Somerville Ave.
Oh, good for you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to speak
Thank
for
you.
them. Thank you. Anybody else, Charlotte?
Madam Chair, there is no one else indicating that they wish to speak.
And I understand we got 4 letters of support.
I will have to check my records to confirm that I've received those. If I did, it was a long while ago, and I do not think I transmitted them to the board.
Okay. All right. So we'll close the public portion, and you'll let us know about the letters as we're chatting here. And let's open it up to the board. What do you folks, who has some comments regarding this variance for a hardship?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I looked in my records, and I do have letters of support on record from Megan Kruger at 26 Loring Street, Trent Fontanella at 26 Loring Street, and Austin Fontanella also at 26 Loring Street. I can forward those to the board, but we do have them.
No, as long as you have the record. Okay, so it's 3 of them. Okay, thank you. So as we go forward, I had a couple of little quick questions as we're all thinking here. When did this house get purchased? I know that Mrs. Conway mentioned it, but I want to write it down here. Charlotte, do you have that info?
I believe it was purchased in June 2020, according to the narrative submitted. Beyond that, I don't have any information.
Okay. And how many bedrooms is it now?
I will leave that to the applicant.
Hello? Jovi or Kyle? Conroy? Can you hear me?
Jovi and Kyle, you are unmuted. I think you had gotten remuted. But Jovi and Kyle, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you. There's currently 3 bedrooms right now. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom.
I'm looking here at A002. Existing level 0, living area proposed the same. Level 1. Level 1. Now that's changing a little bit.
level one's getting opened up to become a little bit of a more of an open floor plan. It's a little bit cramped.
In what room would that be?
The bedrooms would be upstairs, but the kitchen and living room and would be on the first floor.
I see that, but I don't see, they all say living area. I'm asking you, which is the kitchen and which is a living area, like a family room or whatever.
Yeah, the kitchen's to the rear of the property, facing the rear yard, whereas the living room is towards the front, just off of the porch. And then the dining room is also towards the back of the property where it jogs in a little bit.
Okay. And let me see. So that's the first floor. And then we go upstairs to bedrooms.
Yep.
How many bedrooms?
So the bedrooms up on the second floor, there are 2 bedrooms on the second floor in the proposed. Because basically right now there are technically 3 bedrooms on the second floor, but really one of them is that size of like a nursery or smaller, where it's, I think it's about 9 by 9. And so what we're doing in the proposed is putting 2 bedrooms on the second floor and then an additional bedroom up on the third floor. And basically creating a home office, since it seems like work life has changed where people will now be working from home, possibly part-time for who knows how long.
Okay. And how do these buildings, Charlotte, measure up side by side with existing properties to them?
Madam Chair, I do not have any information on how this cottage lines up with the surrounding buildings. I believe one of the buildings is a detached house, which is permitted to be 2.5 stories by right, and the other building may be a detached triple decker, which is permitted to be 3 stories by right. I would have to look at a map to confirm that, but that is the best of my memory.
That's correct. Downhill, there's a triple decker, and uphill, there's a detached.
Thank you.
So Madam
So,
Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
I'm just looking at Google Street View on my other screen, and basically the house, as you're facing the house, the one to the left of it probably originally was identical. I mean, it's the same massing from the street, it just has an addition to the rear. And then the one across from it also appears originally to have been identical, but it's also had some kind of an addition to the rear. So the 3 of them make a cluster at the corner, all of which are, you know, are 2+ story, you know, end gable houses with a small cross gable portion. But they're basically the same house built 3 times, but the other 2 have been expanded with additions.
As it is now, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the other 2 have been expanded with additions into the rear yard, but they all have the
Additions to
same.
the, well, to the rear
Sorry?
yard.
That's
Not
correct.
up.
So they all
Just to
have
the
the
rear,
same ridge,
not
the same
up.
line, the same eaves, etc.
Right, okay. That was one of my concerns. Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Yes, Elaine?
I went down and looked at the site, and I think it's a good project. I just having a difficult time with of us trying to prove the reasons for the variances, and I just didn't know if the applicant was able to go back and do any additional work as to prove the 3 conditions that we need to prove in order to approve a variance, a hardship variance. I think the project is very nice. I'd like to see the families stay in Somerville. I don't think it is detrimental to the neighborhood, but I don't know about the first and the second conditions to approve a hardship variance.
I think the things that we thought sort of warranted a hardship in this particular case I mean, the clayey soil in Somerville and Cambridge really are difficult for drainage. And so, I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do is preserve as much open space on the property as possible and not create more impermeable space that will then just all drain down towards the Market Basket and everything down in Ward 2. As well as that, also just the financial hardship of trying to do an expanded horizontal addition is just gonna cost a lot more money to do. And so we're trying to find ways to make a significant and good renovation to a home without necessarily breaking the bank of our clients as they try to do that and try to stay within this city where they got married, where they've spent, you know, the last decade kind of building their lives.
Anybody else? Catherine? Ann Brockelman's got her hand up. Go ahead, Ann.
The question on the front, does that also need a variance? The enclosing part of the front porch?
No,
Maybe staff?
We worked directly with Charlotte on that to try to make sure it became an engaged porch and made tweaks to it so it met the proper square footages and proper areas for that.
So the dimension of the engaged porch includes enough furniture area and meets the criteria for the Somerville zoning.
You know, can I ask you folks, when you speak, to please identify yourself? First of all, we can't see you. And I don't know who's speaking, if it's somebody from the architectural firm or the family or what, so. Excuse me, I'm still speaking. So number one, to Ann's question about closing the porch, Charlotte, would you answer that, please?
Yes,
the mudroom.
So an engaged porch is, I forget the exact description of it from the code, but it is essentially a porch that on one side has a mudroom like they've proposed, and on the other side has an exterior seating area, and it's permitted to go fully, or it's permitted to fully encroach into the front yard setback. So staff has reviewed it and believes it is compliant and does not require any hardship variances at this time.
Beautiful. Okay, that explains that. And the porch that there, you said about the horizontal is more money to develop than to go up. Did you say that, Sam? Is that what you were saying?
That's correct, Madam Chairman.
Okay. And now tell me something. When you make a purchase like this, you're saying you had all these plans, you want to stay in the city and what have you, yet you buy a house of this size and you're trying to make it bigger, and you're just moving things around to make it more luxurious. I mean, to have a little office up there, to have a bigger bedrooms down there. I think that speaks to whether it's a hardship or not. Josh, you had your hand up. Josh?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just unmuting. I mean, I agree with Elaine's comment that I'm having a hard time making the findings. And you know, frankly, I don't agree as much with Elaine in terms of general support for the project. I think the staff report sort of captures the issue well. You know, cottages, they work for some families and they don't for others, right? You know, we're a family of 4 in about 50 more square feet than this house. And, you know, we live in a 2-story flat roof row house, and it's clear that adding a 3rd story would be out of character with the neighborhood, you know, et cetera. And I feel like the same is true of this. I mean, particularly with the 3 cottages as a cluster at the corner here. You know, we need a diversity of housing stock in the city. We need smaller homes and bigger homes. And I think that the case hasn't been made that this couldn't add square footage of living space without changing the overall, you know, size of the building. And so I'm really, you know, I'm not in support of it. I understand the desire, but you know, the plans that we see are, you know, a big change to the massing and character of the house, in my opinion. And a big jump from where they're at. And I think if the family feels like they need that much space in order to grow a family, then really the appropriate thing to be doing is to be looking for a different house, not trying to take one of the rare smaller homes in the city and you know, fundamentally alter it so it's no longer a cottage type.
Thank you. Ian, you're all set. Catherine, do you have something to add? Or if you're all thinking still, Sam, I thought I saw your hand come up a little bit. Do you have something you'd want to help us with?
Yeah, it was just something that had come up with us where originally when we had reviewed the project, it was a detached single family. Because of the dimensions on it, it is larger than what a cottage is. And then it was determined to be a cottage. And so I just wanted to understand that a little bit, because I think technically it's not a cottage in terms of its sizing, but it's been classified as a cottage. And I don't think, you know, I don't know that we've gotten clarity as to what makes it a cottage versus a single family. And mostly we just want to make sure we're doing that right, because there is a size limitation to what a cottage can be, and this house exceeds that, which would make it
Madam
a single.
Chair,
yes,
if I may address this. So originally, when I was speaking with the applicant from 27 Loring, I had told them that this was a detached house. That was my mistake, and I later corrected that mistake. Prior to the zoning code being adopted, a number of planners in the Planning and Zoning Division and staff from ISD reviewed all of the buildings in the city and determined what building type it was. We have that in a database, and I honestly think when I was checking the database originally, I just clicked on the wrong house, and that was entirely my mistake. And later on in the process, I rectified that mistake and told the applicant that it had actually been determined to be a cottage. So that determination was made on the basis of a whole number of factors, but ultimately it was made by the building official. And so staff defers to that determination. And on a separate note, my staff report goes over that this house really does substantially meet the dimensions, both the dimensions of the building and the dimensions of a lot that are required for a cottage, and is too small of a lot for a detached house.
The maximum size of a cottage is 26 by 32, and this house is 27 by 33, which would technically make it bigger than a cottage.
Technically, but
Right.
what?
You guys are obviously the authority that
Yeah,
decides.
no, sorry. That's 1 foot to me, and 1 foot doesn't, I mean, I see what you're saying, but no,
Okay.
I'm sorry. So we'll call it a larger cottage. How's
Right.
that?
I'm not meaning to be argumentative. I'm just raising the point for discussion. That's all.
Catherine.
Madam Chair, I pulled up the zoning code just to try to acclimate myself a little bit here. And I'm seeing, and I could be wrong because I'm going quickly, that the story height limitation for a cottage is 2 stories. But in addition to that, the story height can be 10 feet or 12 feet. But looking at the house that in its existence, it looks like it's 2.5 stories already. So it's pre-existing non-conforming, right?
That's correct.
Charlotte?
Staff does not believe it is a pre-existing nonconformity. There is no living space on the third, or there's no habitable living space on the 3rd floor or the 2nd and a half floor, and that would be necessary for this to be considered a half-story.
I understand that, but there's also the height limitation that it's already exceeding.
So the story height limitation is distinct from whether or not this has an existing floor. So this house, I didn't double check this, so I can. It may have a pre-existing non-conforming story height of
it
greater
may
than
be-
12 feet.
Yeah, so
that
if
was-
we have, even if we want to say that half story is not livable space, we have a maximum height requirement by the code, and it's already over that.
We have a maximum story height requirement. We don't have a maximum overall building height requirement.
Okay, we're sure about that?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it's a,
Existing non-conforming and having a 2.5 story if it's quantified as a cottage. If it's quantified as a single detached, then it's conforming because it's 2.5 stories. That's the differential, I think, here.
Okay.
Josh, 1 minute, Catherine. I want to catch something here. Josh, did you have your hand up, please? No. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. Catherine? So Charlotte, to Catherine's question, what are you saying?
let me pull up the plans
Yeah.
really quickly so that we can discuss this and look.
Beautiful.
Okay, great. So this is the long section of the existing house. From staff's perspective, this level is not a half story. Does that make
This
sense?
here, what we're looking at now is existing, yes?
Yeah, this is existing, correct?
Basement, first, second, and then this is the attic.
Yep.
Okay, how, so right now that's just storage. You know, no one's living up there. If the ceilings are too low. Is that correct, Charlotte?
I mean, the ceilings are too low. I will leave it to the applicant to confirm that it is just storage. I don't know the interior use.
Short people can stand up there, but not tall people, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It has a window up there. It meets the criteria for a half story, but it is not finished living habitable area. So if it's classified as a cottage, it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. If it's classified as a single detached family, it's a conforming structure.
So I'm gonna, if I may, Madam Chair, I just want to clarify that I will double check this, but to the best of my memory, the definition of a half story is a pitched roof with a living space under it. If there's not living space under this pitched roof, it is not a half story. It is simply a pitched roof, which is
what I think Catherine's bringing out.
typical and normal and permitted for cottages, but that does, just because there is a pitched roof with space under it does not mean that it is a half story, because that space would need to be habitable space. And if only a short person can stand up in this space, I don't think it meets the building code definition of habitable space.
No.
Although I'm not an expert on building code and I'm not pretending to be.
I also see, to your point, there is no overall height limitation listed in the code. It does say per story, just to confirm that from my, again, brief reading.
Right. Well, that's why we're here, to discuss this and hammer out these things so we can make a good decision here. Okay, overall height. So what are you saying, Catherine? There's the overall height of the building.
The overall height of the building, if there was an overall height restriction in the current zoning code, this would be pre-existing legal non-conforming.
Okay. All
I'm
right.
not seeing that as I'm reading through here. Perhaps the applicant would want to delve into that on their end. But
Yeah.
I don't see that restriction here. It's per story. So I don't know that I would make that finding.
as we've gone through the Somerville zoning code, the one thing that we've looked for and had trouble finding, you guys have better clarity on this than ourselves, is the definition of height in the in a habitable story in there or a half story. It does say just livable space, but it doesn't quantify what that is. You know, in some municipalities, it'll determine it as 5 feet or higher. In other areas, it'll determine whether or not based upon gross square footage. And so that this one has a window and accessibility. Does that make it livable space? We don't know. That's why we're here in front of you guys.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Kyle Conroy.
Yes, Carl.
I don't know the details of the zoning, but I can speak to the fact that the attic is used for storage space. It's 6 feet. The interior height is 6 feet.
Oh,
okay.
At the ridge.
Yes, at the center line. And Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to take the opportunity before we continued on to address what Josh said earlier.
Which is?
Well, I just wanted to clarify that we did look at many other houses. We said in our introduction that we spent 3 years looking at properties. We looked at a few in Cambridge, but mainly in Somerville, and only made offers in Somerville. And we had many offers rejected. So although we would have preferred to have a larger house, we really love the location. We love being close to Union Square, and we did buy this property with the understanding that we might not be able to increase the space.
Right. Okay. So, do we have a couple of things that we'd like to get clarification on tonight before we go forward? Do Josh or Ian or Catherine have some technical legal questions that you'd want, or does Charlotte have something she'd like to double check with somebody? Or Catherine, do you have some unfinished question that you'd like to pose? Are you?
No,
or no?
I mean, if the applicant is ready to proceed based on the information they've provided, I think we've discussed at length that maybe we can't make a case for a hardship.
Right. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, sorry, this is Jovi Conroy. I just want to add that, what Kyle, my husband, was saying about looking for many houses for 3 years. This was a house that, it fell into our range of affordability. Other houses, that were a bigger size or maybe in a better location, like Cambridge or outside of Somerville, just didn't fall where we felt, Somerville is our home, and we wanted to stay in it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Elaine has her hand up.
Just a different kind of a question or comment. I see that JT Scott is the ward counselor. I wondered if there were any comments from him.
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of any comments from JT Scott.
Okay, thank you. And Josh, I have to ask you one more question where you pulled up the streetscape. Well, these three are all clustered together, all these 3 cottages, and they're all like the same height right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
So
yes, I mean, for nominally, yes. The street slopes down, and
Yeah.
so the ridge of the house in question is probably lower than the ridge next to it. But I mean, from my view of them, they all appear to have been basically the same vernacular house type, most likely.
Right,
built at the
and
same
all
time,
work was
as I
done,
said.
nothing on the height. Okay, all right.
Madam Chair, this is Kyle Conroy.
Yes, Kyle.
I just was wondering, Josh, specifically, which 3 cottages are you referring to?
Kyle, it would be your house, the one at the corner of Loring and Osgood, and then the one directly across Loring at the other corner of Loring and Osgood.
You're referring to the blue house?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to give clarity, the blue house is in front of the 27th Loring. The house right beside us is actually a 3-story apartment deck.
Well, that's
And
on
then
the other side. That's on the other side of you, down towards Somerville Ave. I'm talking about the uphill side.
Okay.
That house is 2.5 stories and a single detached, and quantified that way under Somerville zoning, no?
Walking down the street, it appears to be the same house as 27.
But it's quantified as a single family detached in Somerville zoning as opposed to a cottage.
I don't know that either way.
We went through all of them in there, and so then that, along with the triple decker next door, which is significantly taller than this house, kind of lend themselves towards this a little more.
If I may, Madam Chair, I would like to disagree that the characteristics of neighboring houses support or reject any argument for either the first or second criteria in this particular case, or in any hardship variance case. A hardship variance is very strictly focused on the lot in question, and whether neighboring lots are different building types or different heights is maybe not relevant to whether there is anything unique about this cottage on this lot.
Okay. So as we go forward, like Catherine said, she doesn't feel that the applicant has shown met the criteria of the 3 points for the hardship. Anybody else feel they have? No. So we're ready to go forward and vote for the denial. Unless any of you have, Ann, 1 second, please, Sam. Ann Brockelman, you have your hand up?
Madam Chair, so Charlotte, is there still something you're checking whether it's a cottage or not? Because that would determine whether it's a variance is needed or not, right?
This is a cottage. When I originally, I don't know what happened when I originally checked it, but I have since double, triple, and quadruple checked the designation that we have a record of for this property, and it has been designated as a cottage. I truly do apologize for the original confusion, but it is a cottage.
So there's no fact finding that staff needs to go back to do. So we agree on that now. I mean, I'm in agreement with other board members. You know, I applaud the, creativity in trying to go upwards and reduce the garage and increase green space in the back. I think that's great. But looking at the hardship, I can't make all the findings either.
Now,
So
yeah, that's the thing. I'm sorry, Ann, I didn't mean to speak over you. I apologize.
No, that was it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Charlotte, so before we go any further, are there other avenues these folks can take instead of going up to avoid the hardship?
So staff generally avoids making any recommendations of specifically what to do in case a recommendation that we make turns out to not be possible. But
yeah,
other options for what could be looked at include finishing the basement, which basements can be finished by right. We do not regulate the amount of interior finished
All right, so
space
let
versus
me
unfinished
stop
space.
you. Charlotte, let me stop you then. You're answering my question by starting that. So what I'm trying to avoid is a denial and let them walk away and can't do anything. If we deny this tonight, they can't do anything for how long? 2 years?
If this is denied tonight, they cannot reapply for this sort of relief for 2 years. It would not prevent them from doing anything that is permitted by the code. It would just prevent them from requesting relief that is substantively similar without, not to get into it too detailed, but without a determination by the ZBA and the planning board that
So if they
substantive
ask,
matters have changed.
right, if they go away and ask for a continuance tonight and rework this, now that they've spoken to us, they've heard what the comments we have, is that an option for them to consider if they choose to?
If they choose to request a continuance tonight, I think the ultimate outcome of this particular case would continue to be a vote by the board to approve, a vote by the board to deny, or the applicant's request to withdraw. As this case has been advertised, if nonconformities are no longer needed, no relief is needed, or sorry, I misspoke. If hardship variances are no longer needed, they would have no reason to come to the board. Unless a hardship variance is needed, most things can be done by right in this district.
Right.
So a continuance could provide the applicant with time to explore other options, but ultimately either the hardship variances would need to be voted on or the request would need to be withdrawn.
Right.
Madam Chair, can I speak? This is Jovi Conroy.
Yes, please.
I know several folks have stated that there's no, it doesn't seem to meet, the variance, the need for it, but I think the financial aspect of this is, I think, I'm not sure if that came across correctly. This really is the most affordable way for us to increase the square footage. And I understand, Josh, that you were saying, you have 4 people in your space, but the current space and the layout right now just doesn't, it's not good for the family that we're thinking of, and just finishing the basement or expanding out to other areas of the neighborhood, again, would impact the neighbors, and it would be financially more costly for us. So I really want the board to really consider that, please.
Well, that's all well and good, but there's 3 criterias and the financial is only one of the 3. So I think we're just going round and round and round right now. Sam Karchma, go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, are there recommendations that the board would make if we took a continuance to make some adjustments to the design? So if we came back, that we might be able to seek approval if we made some adjustments in some way that would satisfy the board?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to hash out here, if this is a dead end or not. And that's why I'm checking to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn or saying the wrong thing either with our staff person here. As it stands right now, it looks like we would be denying you tonight. It just looks from the feedback I'm getting from, we need 4 for the denial, or say you need 4 approval to pass. I don't see that happening right now. So what I'm saying is that I feel our questions are answered. Catherine, Ann, Josh, our questions have been answered. It behooves you. You're the one that has to come to us and justify the criteria of the hardship variance considerations. And we don't feel you've met that. Now, if listening to us speak, and if you want to ask for a continuance, there's no guarantee that when you come back either with a new plan or a new idea or a new scheme, that that's going to be approved just like that. It just doesn't happen that way. So we can't make promises we can't keep. All I'm telling you is right now, you know, and I don't know, if you want to go for a vote, we'll go for the vote. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm just feeling the feel of everybody, the questions they're asking and the stuff they're putting on the table. It sounds to me like they don't feel you've proved your position. So it's up to you. Do you want to take a vote?
I would love to confer with our client. I think what we'd want to take is a continuance, and any kind of guidance we could get from the board as to how to improve our application, we would gladly take and meet with staff and go through that.
I think what we've said is enough, and I think we've said enough. And I think Charlotte advised you, you know, a variance is a really big deal. And that's why with the new ordinances and stuff, we've put this, this step at the beginning of the process, because with the old school, people would be hiring lawyers, architects, buy the building, do this, do that, and not necessarily for a home, but for other buildings. And then they come down for the variance and we'd say no, that we're hitting the roof because it's been so costly. So when you folks go into the office to the staff person and want to start applying for special permits, variances, whatever, they advise you, and I know they do, and give you a real feel of what's going to go. They know it. So I know that you were spoken to about this. I'm sure you would. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't see if any of us have anything more to say. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say to the applicant? No. Okay. Everybody's saying, I don't know if you could see us or not. I can see you, but nobody's raising their hand. Charlotte, if they ask for a continuance for tonight, would they then get a hold of you and ask you if you have any suggestions for them to get some improvement on their property, some expansion to their home? Is that or am I speaking out of turn?
From what I have heard the board say, the challenge that the applicant is really facing and would need to think hard about if they requested a continuance between now and the next meeting is, I think, really the first criteria: what is unique about the lot and how does that uniqueness cause a hardship? And that is not something that staff can provide any assistance in developing an argument for. The other alternative would be to redesign the project into a conforming proposal, which staff in this case and in all cases always strongly recommends because of how challenging it is to get a hardship variance. But we are not architects and not in the practice of providing concrete design options for how to achieve a conforming project. In this case, the way to achieve not requiring a hardship variance is to not propose a half story, but beyond that, we can't, I don't think can responsibly recommend specific other ways of getting that living space that they seek. So I don't know what assistance staff would really be able to provide if a continuance is requested.
All right, thank you. That's why I just wanted you to be honest, you know. Josh, your hands
Madam
up.
Chair, sorry, I don't want to prolong things, but I just wanted to say one thing, and it's really to the applicants because, you know, we're pretty much neighbors, and I just want to make sure I'm making myself clear. You know, I'm sorry, Kyle and Jovi, I'm not saying you should just live, you know, build your family like we built ours, or live,
No.
you know, everyone, you know, that's not what bringing up my own house maybe wasn't the best way of doing that. I think what I was trying to say is that houses have limitations, you know, and there are certain things you can do in some buildings and other things you can't do in others. And there are lots of trade-offs in terms of where you buy a home, what it costs, you know, what advantages it provides being near Union Square or not, you know, et cetera. And so I just think that the feedback you're getting from the board is that the proposal that we're looking at, you know, goes beyond the limitations of this particular house. And that we can't, with the mechanisms available to us in the zoning ordinance, we can't find a way to approve that project. But I just wanted to be clear or amend it if I came across a different way. I don't mean to say that I have any opinion on how you should be living your life or building a family or choosing a home. I think that's not my place. And so I apologize if that's the way that it came across.
Thank you, Josh. And Sam, you had something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to make sure that we got across earlier on in the presentation that the uniqueness of this site was the slope site and about the 20 to 30% grade of the hill, as well as the soil conditions in there. And was that not clear in our original presentation?
Well, no, I think we were aware of that.
Okay, you guys were talking about the criteria for the hardship, and I just wanted to make sure that we had that in there.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
Anybody else? No. So what's your posture? What would you like to do, folks?
I think we'd like to pursue a continuance, Madam Chairman. I think we'd like to try to find a way to make this work. We'll try to work with staff. We'll try to find how we can adjust the design to try to improve it in some capacity and come back to see you guys again.
I like that. I think that's prudent right now to do that. And so can we have the next meeting is July 14th. It's the only one in July. I don't know if you guys are rushing on this or what. What would they need to get to you, Charlotte, for the legal notice? Or can they go to August? It's
So
up to them.
no legal notice would be required if they're requesting a continuance. They can just request a continuance to July 14th.
Okay.
That would be perfectly acceptable.
All right. Let's do that. My suggestion would be to the architect who's representing the folks is continue tonight to the July 14th. That's the plan. If it's working out fine, we'll see on the 14th. If it doesn't work out, you can ask for an extension on that. Yes, Charlotte? Okay? Okay.
Yes.
Sound okay with the applicant?
Yep.
Kyle and Jovi?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we'll go for the 14th, see what you guys can come up with, communicate with Charlotte. And if you need a little more time after that, there's no problem. I don't see us refusing the extension, no sweat. Okay, so could I get so technically you're gonna go for the 14th?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Josh, would you please make a motion?
Madam Chair, in the matter of 27 Loring Street, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the applicant's request to continue the matter until our next regularly scheduled meeting, July 14th, 2021.
Thank you. May I have a second? Seconded by Elaine Severino. All in favor of approving the continuance to 27 Loring Street, P&Z 21-004 to July 14th. Elaine Severino.
Aye.
Josh Safdie.
Aye.
Ann Brockelman.
Aye.
Catherine Cavallaglia.
Aye.
And Susan Fontano, aye. All the unanimous to continue till July 14th. Thank you. Good night, folks. Thank you for your patience. Good luck.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Is there if anybody have any other business they wanted to address the board with? No, seeing no. May I have a motion to conclude, please?
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded by? Seconded by Ann Brockelman. Thank you. All in favor? Elaine Severino? Elaine? She shut us off. Elaine, we're signing off. Are you in favor of adjourning? Susan Fontano, yes. Josh Safdie, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Catherine, yes. Ann Brockelman, yes. And Elaine is not there. Okay.
We don't need all 5 to adjourn. I'll mark that
Right.
as
So
4 to
we
0
got
to
a quorum. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. I'll talk to you all. Josh, great job. Welcome. Thank you. Ann, I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Elaine,
night.
thumbs up. All right. Catherine,
Josh.
what's up?
Josh and Catherine. Catherine, I know you will be kind of taking on Josh's role of being backup clerk. And Josh, with the role of clerk, if either of you have any questions, we can set up a one-on-one training to go over that, go over anything you have, make sure that you're comfortable with that role moving forward. Just let me know what you want, especially if you let me know early. I can cover stuff. But yeah, I'm happy to do any one-on-one training.
So Ann, take 2 aspirins and call us in the morning. Hope you feel better. Good night, everybody. Good job. Have a good
Bye.
in July.